When a billionaire CEO walked into a dying garage and threatened to bulldoze a single father's entire world, she had no idea the grease-covered mechanic standing before her was the genius engineer her own corporation had destroyed 3 years ago. Now he's built something worth millions in secret, and she's about to realize her biggest mistake wasn't underestimating him. It was making his 6-year-old daughter cry. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches. The November wind carried the smell of motor oil and dead leaves through the broken window of Carter's auto repair, mixing with the metallic tang of an approaching storm. Ryan Carter didn't notice. He was 3 knuckles deep in a transmission that should have been replaced in 2015, his hands black with grease, his back screaming from 4 hours in the same position. "Daddy, the scary lady is back." Ryan's wrench slipped. He caught it before it hit the concrete, but barely. Sophie stood in the doorway between the garage and the tiny office, her Captain America backpack still on, blonde hair tangled from the playground. She was supposed to be doing homework at the desk where Ryan could see her. Instead, she was staring out the front window, small hands pressed against the glass. "What scary lady?" Ryan slid out from under the Honda, wiping his forehead with his forearm and probably making it worse. "The one from yesterday, with the shoes that make clicking sounds." Ryan's stomach tightened. He pushed himself up, joints popping, and moved to the window. Sophie wasn't wrong. Victoria Hale stood on the cracked sidewalk outside his garage, examining the building like it was a diseased tooth that needed extraction. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Ryan's monthly revenue, and her heels, yeah, Sophie had that right, were black and sharp enough to qualify as weapons. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that meant business, and she held a leather portfolio that definitely wasn't full of good news. "Go finish your math," Ryan said quietly. "I'll handle this." "Is she going to take our garage?" The question hit him in the chest. Sophie had already lost so much. Her mother, their old house, the stability of a normal childhood. This garage, run down and forgotten as it was the only constant she had left. "No one's taking anything." Ryan forced his voice steady. "Now go. I'll bring you a snack in 10 minutes. Sophie didn't move. "You promised we wouldn't have to move again. And we won't, I promise. Now scoot." She went, but slowly, glancing back twice. Ryan waited until she was settled at the desk, pencil in hand, before he stepped outside. The cold hit him immediately. He should have grabbed a jacket, but somehow he didn't want to keep Victoria Hale waiting while he looked for one. She noticed him the moment he emerged, and her expression didn't change. Cool, professional, completely unreadable. "Mr. Carter?" She extended a hand. Ryan looked at his own hands, both thoroughly coated in transmission fluid, then back at her. "I'd shake, but I don't think your manicurist would appreciate it." Her hand dropped. "I'll be brief. I represent Hale Development Corporation. We're moving forward with the Hartford Street Revitalization Project, and this property falls within our acquisition zone." Acquisition zone. Ryan tasted the words. "That's a polite way of saying bulldozer radius. We're prepared to offer you fair market value, plus a 20% premium for expedited vacancy." Not interested. Victoria's eyebrow lifted a fraction, the first crack in her composure. "You haven't heard the offer." "Don't need to. This garage isn't for sale." "Mr. Carter, I understand attachment to a family business, but this building is—" She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Falling apart?" Ryan supplied. "Yeah, I know. I work here. The entire block is zoned for demolition. We're building a mixed-use development, residential, commercial, green space. It'll transform this neighborhood. This neighborhood doesn't need transforming. It needs people to stop tearing it apart." Victoria's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The city council has already approved the project. We have eminent domain backing if necessary, but we'd prefer to handle this amicably." Amicably. Ryan laughed, sharp and humorless. "You show up at my business, tell me you're going to destroy it, and call that amicable? I'm giving you advance notice and a generous settlement. Most property owners would—" "I'm not most property owners." Ryan stepped closer, and something in his movement made Victoria hesitate. "This garage was my father's. It's the only thing my daughter has left that's stable. So no, I'm not interested in your money or your mixed-use development or your transformed neighborhood. Find another block to destroy." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The wind kicked up again, carrying a newspaper down the street. Somewhere, a car alarm went off and stopped. Victoria's gaze shifted past Ryan's shoulder, into the garage. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That's an interesting whiteboard. Ryan turned. From where they stood, the massive board covering the back wall was partially visible. Equations, schematics, circuit diagrams. He'd meant to erase it before Sophie got home from school, but he'd gotten distracted by the Honda. I like to stay busy, Ryan said flatly. Those aren't repair notes. Victoria took a step toward the garage entrance. That's systems engineering, high-level work. You an engineer? I have a degree in mechanical engineering from MIT. I don't use it much anymore, but I recognize advanced mathematics when I see it. She looked at him differently now, reassessing. What are you working on? Nothing that concerns you. Mr. Carter, Ryan! Sophie's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway, backpack forgotten, eyes wide. Are you fighting with the lady? Victoria's expression shifted, softening in a way that looked almost painful, like her face wasn't used to the motion. We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're just talking. You're going to take our garage. It wasn't a question. Sophie, Ryan started, but Victoria spoke over him. That's not decided yet. Liar! Sophie's voice was small but sharp. You're like the people who came to our old house. You all say it's not decided, and then you take things anyway. Victoria flinched, actually flinched. Ryan moved between them. Sophie, inside. Now. But now. She ran. Ryan heard the office door slam, heard the scrape of her chair, and knew she was probably crying into her backpack the way she did when the world got too big and too cruel. When he turned back, Victoria was staring at the spot where Sophie had been standing. I didn't mean to upset her, Victoria said quietly. Then leave. The project is happening, Mr. Carter, with or without your cooperation. Then I guess it's without. Victoria opened her portfolio, extracted a business card, and held it out. When Ryan didn't take it, she placed it on the hood of a rusted pickup truck parked nearby. You have 2 weeks to reconsider. After that, the legal process begins, and it won't be pleasant for anyone. She started toward a black Mercedes parked down the street, then paused. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. That whiteboard, whatever you're working on, it's sophisticated. You're clearly talented. There might be opportunities for someone with your skills in the new development. Ryan watched her walk away, heels clicking against the broken pavement. I don't want your opportunities, he said to the empty street. Chick. Inside, Sophie had her face buried in her arms on the desk. Her homework was crumpled underneath her. Ryan sat down in the chair beside her, not touching, just present. She's not taking the garage, kiddo. Sophie didn't look up. You can't stop her? Nobody can stop people like that. You don't know what I can do. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red. You're just a mechanic. The words shouldn't have stung, but they did. Just a mechanic? That's what the kids at school said. Taylor's dad is a lawyer. Madison's mom is a doctor. And my dad just fixes cars. She wiped her nose on her sleeve. So how are you going to stop a rich lady with a whole company? Ryan was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind rattled the garage door. A fluorescent light flickered overhead, buzzing like an angry wasp. Finally, he stood and walked to the whiteboard. Sophie watched him pick up an eraser and start wiping away equations, weeks of work disappearing in seconds. Daddy, what are you doing? He didn't answer until the board was completely clean. Then he turned. Come here. Sophie slid off her chair and approached cautiously. Ryan handed her a blue marker. I'm going to tell you something, and you have to promise never to tell anyone at school. Her eyes went wide. A secret? The biggest one I have. He knelt down so they were eye level. You're right, I do fix cars, but that's not all I do. Before you were born, before Mom died, I was a different kind of engineer. I built things, important things. Electric cars that could change how the whole world drives. Sophie's grip tightened on the marker. Really? Really? And when Mom died, I stopped. I ran away from all of it because I was too sad and too angry, and I didn't know how to keep going. So we came here to Grandpa's garage, and I thought maybe I'd just fix cars forever and forget about being anything else. But you didn't forget. Ryan smiled. No, I didn't. Every night after you go to sleep, I've been working on something. Something that could help people. Something that might be worth a lot of money. Sophie looked at the whiteboard, then back at him. Is that what all the math was? Yeah. Can it stop the scary lady? Maybe. If I can finish it in time, if I can prove it works, if I can find people who believe in it. He took the marker from her hand and drew a simple car on the board. But I need help. From me? From you, and from someone else, someone I haven't talked to in a very long time. Bad. That night, after Sophie fell asleep with her stuffed elephant, Ryan sat in the garage office with his laptop open and his phone in his hand. The number was still saved in his contacts, Arthur Bennett. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since the funeral, not since Ryan had ignored every call, every email, every attempt at connection. Arthur had been his mentor once, back when Ryan was leading the EV project at Northbrook Technologies. The old man had tried to warn him about corporate politics, about protecting his work, about not trusting the wrong people. Ryan hadn't listened. And then everything had fallen apart. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he even say? Hey, remember me? The guy who ghosted you for 3 years? Want to invest in a project I've been building in a garage with equipment I bought on Craigslist? The phone rang before he could decide. Unknown number. Ryan almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, curiosity, desperation, made him swipe. Hello? Ryan Carter? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm executive director at Hale Development Corporation. I understand you had a conversation with Ms. Hale today. Ryan's jaw clenched. Brief one. I'm calling to follow up. We're moving quickly on the Hartford Street project, and frankly, you're creating an obstacle. Then go around. It's not that simple. Your property is central to the site plan. Without it, the entire development loses cohesion. Papers rustled on the other end. I've reviewed the ownership records. The garage has been in your family for 40 years. I respect that. But sentimentality doesn't pay bills, Mr. Carter. And from what I can see, you're barely keeping the lights on. My finances are none of your business. They are when they intersect with a $60 million project. Listen, I'm prepared to increase the offer, 40% above market value. That's an extra $100,000. Cash. Take it and start fresh somewhere else. Not interested? Then you're a fool. The professionalism cracked, showing something harder underneath. This project is happening. We have every legal right to proceed. You can take the money and walk away with dignity, or you can fight and lose everything. Your choice. I choose to hang up now. Wait. Ryan ended the call. His hand was shaking. He looked around the office. Stacks of repair invoices. Sophie's drawings taped to the walls. A photo of his wife, Emma, holding newborn Sophie in the hospital. The room smelled like coffee and motor oil and the vanilla air freshener Sophie had insisted on buying last month. This place wasn't much, but it was theirs. His phone buzzed. Text message from the same unknown number. You're making a mistake. Last chance to be smart about this. Ryan deleted it and blocked the number. Then, before he could talk himself out of it, he called Arthur Bennett. The phone rang 4 times. Ryan was about to hang up when, "This is Arthur." The voice hit him like a punch. Older than he remembered, tired, but unmistakably the same man who'd sat with him in hospital waiting rooms, who'd helped him move Emma's things out of their old house, who'd offered to pay for Sophie's preschool when money got tight. "Arthur, it's Ryan." Silence. Long enough that Ryan wondered if the call had dropped. Then, "I'll be damned. I know it's been a while. 3 years, 2 months, but who's counting?" Ryan winced. "I'm sorry, I couldn't talk to anyone, not after—" "I know. Emma loved you so much, kid. I get it." A pause. "But you still should have called." "You're right. So why now?" Ryan looked at the whiteboard, blank except for Sophie's blue car. "Because I need help, and because I think I finally built something worth talking about." "I'm listening." Arthur Bennett arrived 3 days later driving a Tesla that looked hilariously out of place on Hartford Street. He was 72 years old with white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of smile that made you want to trust him even when you knew better. Sophie answered the door. "Are you the helper?" she asked, blocking the entrance with one hand on her hip. Arthur blinked. "I suppose I am. Is your father here?" He's in the garage. But I have to ask you questions first. Sophie. Ryan appeared behind her, wiping his hands on a rag. Let the man inside before he freezes. I'm vetting him, Sophie said seriously. You said we need good people. Arthur laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made the tiny office feel warmer. Fair enough. Ask away, young lady. Do you like dogs? Love them. Had a golden retriever named Pancake until last year. Why Pancake? Because he was flat and golden and made everything better. Sophie considered this. Okay. Do you promise not to steal our garage? Arthur's expression sobered. He knelt down, joints creaking, until he was eye level with her. I promise. In fact, I'm here to help make sure nobody takes it from you. Pinky promise? He held out his pinky. Sophie locked hers around it, nodded once, and stepped aside. You can come in. Ryan led Arthur into the garage. The old man stopped just inside the door, his eyes going wide as he took in the space. The front half looked exactly like what it was. A struggling auto repair shop, lift, tool chests, half-disassembled vehicles. But the back half told a different story. A workbench covered in circuit boards, oscilloscopes and multimeters, spools of copper wire, battery cells in various stages of testing. And behind it all, the whiteboard, now covered again in equations and schematics. Arthur walked closer slowly, like he was approaching something sacred. Holy hell, Ryan, is this what I think it is? Depends what you think it is. Arthur pointed at a partially assembled unit on the bench, about the size of a car battery, covered in heat sinks and connection points. That's a conversion controller for retrofitting combustion engines with electric drive systems. Close. Close? Arthur picked up a schematic, scanned it, and his eyebrows shot up. This isn't just a conversion kit. This is a modular universal platform. You're saying this single unit could adapt to any vehicle architecture? Any passenger vehicle under 3 tons. Trucks, SUVs, sedans, doesn't matter. Same core unit, different mounting brackets, and wiring harnesses. Ryan moved to the whiteboard and tapped a diagram. Installation time, 4 to 6 hours. Cost, under $5,000 per vehicle. Range, 200 miles on a full charge. Arthur set down the schematic carefully, like it might explode. Ryan, do you understand what you've built here? A way to keep my garage. No. You've built a way to retrofit the entire existing vehicle fleet. There are 280 million cars in America. If even 1% adopted this technology, that's why I called you. Arthur turned. You need funding. I need investors who won't steal it. I need lawyers who can protect the patents. I need manufacturing partners who can scale production. Ryan's voice was steady, but his hand shook. And I need all of it fast because in 11 days, a development company is going to start legal proceedings to take this building. And if they succeed, I lose everything. Hale Development. You know them? I know of them. Victoria Hale inherited the company from her father 5 years ago. She's smart, ruthless, and doesn't lose often. Arthur walked the length of the garage thinking. They're serious about the Hartford Street project. I've seen the proposals, $60 million investment, city backing. They won't walk away because one mechanic won't sell. Then I need to make them. By doing what? Ryan pulled a sheet off something in the corner. A 2008 Toyota Camry. Unremarkable, except for the complete absence of an engine in the front compartment. In its place, the conversion system, fully installed, connected to the drivetrain. By proving this works, by getting investor commitments big enough that tearing down this garage becomes more expensive than redesigning their project. Ryan grabbed a set of keys from the workbench. And by doing it all before they bury me in paperwork. Arthur stared at the Camry. Does it run? Only one way to find out. The car started with a whisper instead of a roar. Sophie, watching from the office window, pressed her face against the glass. Arthur sat in the passenger seat, one hand gripping the door handle, the other clutching a heart rate monitor from his watch. When's the last time you road tested this? He asked. About 6 hours ago. Made it 3 blocks before the thermal management system overloaded. And you fixed that? Theoretically. Ryan, relax. I'm 90% sure it won't catch fire. 90%? Ryan shifted into drive. The Camry rolled forward silently, out of the garage onto Hartford Street. He accelerated smoothly, 20 miles per hour, 30, 40. Arthur checked his watch. Battery temperature? Ryan glanced at the custom display mounted on the dashboard. Nominal, holding steady at 42 Celsius. They reached the end of the block. Ryan turned left, then left again, circling the neighborhood. The car handled normally, better than normal actually, with the weight distribution of the battery pack mounted low in the chassis. Power draw? Arthur asked. 15 kilowatts, well within system capacity. They drove for 20 minutes. No smoke, no warning lights, no sudden failures. When they pulled back into the garage, Arthur was smiling. "You brilliant son of a bitch. You actually did it." Ryan killed the power and sat back, adrenaline draining. "Yeah, I did." "How many test cycles have you run?" 247. "Failure rate?" "Started at 60%, now down to less than 5%, and those are all user error in installation." Arthur pulled out his phone. "I'm making calls tonight. There are people who need to see this." "Who?" "Investors I trust. People who understand what you've built and won't try to steal it." He opened the passenger door, paused. "But Ryan, you need to understand something. The moment this goes public, everything changes. Hail development won't be your biggest problem anymore. You'll have automotive companies, oil interests, patent trolls. Everyone's going to come after you. Let them come. You have a daughter to protect. I know. That's why I'm doing this." Ryan looked through the windshield at Sophie, still watching from the window. "She asked me how a mechanic fights a corporation. I'm going to show her." Wag. That night, while Sophie slept and Arthur made phone calls from a hotel downtown, Ryan sat alone in the garage and thought about Emma. She would have hated this. The risk, the attention, the fight. Emma had been a nurse, practical, careful, always thinking 3 steps ahead. When Ryan was at Northbrook Technologies, working 80-hour weeks on the original EV project, she'd been the one who reminded him to eat, to sleep, to remember there was a world outside the lab. And when the company had turned on him, when they'd buried his work and pushed him out, she'd been the one who said, "Let it go. We'll start over somewhere quiet." 3 months later, she was dead. Drunk driver. Wrong place, wrong time. Gone. Ryan had wanted to burn Northbrook Technologies to the ground. Instead, he'd disappeared. But now, sitting in his father's garage with 3 years of secret work behind him and 11 days to save everything, he realized Emma had been wrong about one thing. Some fights you can't walk away from. Some fights find you whether you're ready or not. His phone buzzed. Text from Arthur. "Meeting set for Monday. 4 investors. Conference room at the Fairmont. They want to see the car and the technical specs. This is happening, kid." Ryan typed back, "Thank you." Then he stood, walked to the whiteboard, and started writing. He had 72 hours to prepare a presentation that would determine everything. The marker squeaked against the board. Equations flowed from his hand like muscle memory. Outside, the November wind howled, and somewhere in the darkness, Victoria Hale's development company was probably drawing up legal documents with his name on them. Let them. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He never had been. The presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock Monday afternoon. Ryan had 53 hours to prepare, and he'd already wasted 6 of them trying to make Sophie eat breakfast. "I don't like oatmeal anymore," she announced, pushing the bowl away. "You liked it yesterday." "That was yesterday." She folded her arms. "Today it looks like glue." Ryan rubbed his eyes. He'd been up until 4 in the morning running thermal stress tests on the battery management system, and his patience was somewhere between empty and non-existent. "Sophie, eat. You're not eating. I had coffee. Coffee isn't breakfast. You told me that." She tilted her head, using his own logic against him. "You said coffee is what adults drink when they're too tired to make good choices." Arthur, sitting across the table with his own bowl of oatmeal, laughed into his spoon. "Traitor," Ryan muttered. "The child has a point," Arthur said. "When's the last time you had actual food?" Ryan couldn't remember. "I'll eat after the presentation." "That's 2 days from now." "Then I'll eat in 2 days." Sophie slid out of her chair and disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with a granola bar, unwrapped it, and thrust it at Ryan's face. "Eat. Now. Or I'm telling Arthur you're making bad choices." Arthur's grin widened. "I like her." Ryan took the granola bar. It tasted like cardboard and shame, but Sophie watched him with such fierce satisfaction that he chewed and swallowed every bite. Happy? Very. She climbed back into her chair and took a deliberate spoonful of oatmeal. See? Leadership. Where'd you learn that word? Ms. Patterson. She says leaders eat breakfast and make people do healthy things. Another spoonful. I'm going to be a leader when I grow up. You're already a leader, kiddo. Ryan stood, kissed the top of her head. Now finish that glue so I can drop you at school. The drive to Riverside Elementary took 12 minutes. Sophie talked the entire time about a boy named Marcus who'd brought a snake to show and tell, about how her friend Zoe thought butterflies were just pretty worms, and about whether dragons could actually breathe underwater or if that was only in cartoons. Ryan made appropriate noises in the right places, but his mind was elsewhere, running through the presentation, checking calculations, worrying about things he couldn't control. Daddy, you're not listening. He blinked. They were parked in front of the school. Sorry, what? I asked if you're going to pick me up today, or if it's aftercare again. Guilt twisted in his chest. Sophie had spent more time in aftercare this month than in their actual home. Arthur's picking you up. I have to finish prep for the meeting. The important meeting. Yeah. The one that saves the garage. That's the one. Sophie unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't get out. What if they say no? They won't. But what if they do? Ryan turned in his seat to face her. Then I find different investors, and if they say no, I find more. I'll keep going until someone says yes. And if everyone says no? He wanted to lie, to tell her everything would definitely work out, that good people always won, that the world was fair and kind and predictable. But Emma had hated lies, even small ones, even the kind meant to protect. Then we figure out something else, Ryan said. But we don't give up. Deal? Sophie studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Deal. She grabbed her backpack and bolted for the entrance, blonde hair flying behind her. At the door, she turned and waved. Ryan waved back. Then he sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes, watching other parents drop off their kids, wondering if any of them were also one failed presentation away from losing everything. Back at the garage, Arthur had transformed the office into a war room. Papers covered every surface. The whiteboard now held a timeline, a task list, and something that looked suspiciously like a battle plan. What's all this? Ryan asked. Organization. You're brilliant with engineering, but terrible with project management. Arthur handed him a coffee. Drink. You look like hell. Thanks. I mean it. If you show up to the Fairmont looking like you haven't slept in a week, investors are going to assume you're unreliable. I'm not unreliable. I'm busy. You're exhausted. There's a difference. Arthur pointed at the timeline. We have until 2 o'clock Monday. That's 47 hours. Here's how we're using them. Ryan scanned the board. Every hour accounted for. Presentation prep, technical documentation, vehicle testing, even blocks labeled sleep and meals, which seemed optimistic. You scheduled sleep? Someone has to, because you won't. Arthur tapped the Sunday evening block. 6 hours. Non-negotiable. You'll present better rested. I can sleep after... Ryan, listen to me. Arthur's voice went serious. I've seen brilliant people destroy themselves before. They work themselves into exhaustion, then make critical mistakes at the exact moment they can't afford to. You have one shot at this presentation. One. And you need to be sharp. Ryan wanted to argue, but the old man was right. Fine, 6 hours. Good. Now let's talk about the investors. Arthur pulled up a document on his laptop. 4 names, photos, brief bios. Cynthia Rodriguez, Venture Capital, specializes in green technology. She's tough but fair. If the numbers work, she'll commit. Ryan studied the photo. A woman in her 50s, sharp eyes, professional smile that didn't quite reach those eyes. Next is David Park. Made his fortune in software, now looking for hardware plays. He's cautious but willing to take risks on the right team. Does he know I'm a one-man operation working out of a garage? He knows. Doesn't care. He started his first company in his parents' basement. Arthur moved to the next photo. Jennifer Okonkwo. Environmental focus. She won't just want good technology. She'll want proof it can scale and make a real impact. And the fourth? Arthur hesitated. Marcus Webb. Why do you look worried? Because Webb is brilliant and paranoid in equal measure. He'll look for every possible way the technology could fail, every legal vulnerability, every competitive threat. If he commits, it means the project is bulletproof, but getting him there is hell. Ryan leaned back against the desk. 4 investors, 4 different perspectives, 4 chances to screw this up. What's the minimum we need? Ideally all 4, realistically 3, but you need at least 2 to have enough capital to move forward. Arthur closed the laptop. They're each prepared to commit between 1 and 3 million, depending on what they see Monday. That's up to 12 million, if everything goes perfectly, which it won't. Optimistic. Realistic. There's always something. Arthur pulled out a folder, handed it to Ryan. Which brings me to our other problem. Inside the folder, legal documents, contracts from Northbrook Technologies, termination agreements, non-compete clauses. Ryan's stomach dropped. Where did you get these? I still have contacts at Northbrook. They're not happy you disappeared, but they haven't actively pursued legal action. Arthur pointed to a specific paragraph. Yet. The non-compete clause prohibited Ryan from working on electric vehicle technology for any competitor or starting his own venture in the same space for 3 years following termination. This expired 6 months ago, Ryan said. Correct. But Northbrook could argue that your work at the garage began before expiration, which would violate the agreement. That's bullshit. I didn't touch this project until after the clause ended. Can you prove that? Ryan thought about the notebooks in his office. Every design iteration, every test result, all carefully dated. Yeah, I can prove it. Good, because if Hale Development catches wind of this, they'll use it. Victoria Hale strikes me as the type who does her homework. She already saw the whiteboard. Arthur's expression darkened. What? When she came to the garage, she commented on it, said it was sophisticated. Then she knows you're more than just a mechanic. Doesn't mean she knows what I'm building. Doesn't mean she doesn't. Arthur stood, paced the small office. We need to assume she's investigating, which means we need to move faster than she does. The rest of Saturday disappeared into preparation. Ryan assembled the technical documentation, specifications, test data, cost projections, manufacturing timelines. Arthur worked on the financial model, projecting revenue growth based on different adoption scenarios. By midnight, they had a 90-slide presentation that covered everything from molecular battery chemistry to 5-year market penetration forecasts. This is too much, Ryan said, scrolling through the deck. You're right. Cut it in half. Half? Investors don't want a dissertation. They want the hook, the proof, and the ask. Everything else is appendix material. Arthur highlighted a section. This part about thermal management, it's fascinating, but it doesn't belong in the main presentation. It's critical to understanding why the system works. It's critical to you. To them, it's details. They need to know it works, not how every component functions. Ryan hated it, but Arthur was right. He spent the next 2 hours cutting, condensing, restructuring. By 2 in the morning, the presentation was 35 slides. Lean, focused, terrifying. Better, Arthur said. Now sleep. I need to sleep. That's an order. Ryan went upstairs to the apartment above the garage. Sophie was asleep in her room, elephant tucked under one arm. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. If this didn't work, he'd have to tell her they were moving again. New city, new school, new everything. The thought made him physically sick. He collapsed into bed without changing clothes and was unconscious in seconds. Sunday morning arrived with Arthur pounding on the apartment door. You said 6 hours, Ryan mumbled, checking his phone. It's been 4. We have a problem. Ryan was awake instantly. What kind of problem? The kind that drives a Mercedes and carries legal paperwork. Victoria Hale was waiting in the garage when Ryan came downstairs. She stood near the Camry, examining the conversion system with the kind of focus that made Ryan's instincts scream danger. This is private property, he said. Victoria didn't look up. The door was open. That doesn't make it an invitation. No, but this does. She held up a document. Preliminary injunction, filed this morning. It freezes any commercial development or business operation on this property pending resolution of the eminent domain proceedings. Ryan snatched the paper from her hand. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. He couldn't sell anything, couldn't sign contracts, couldn't operate the garage as a business. You can't do this. It's already done, effective immediately. Victoria finally looked at him. You've been busy since we last spoke. Get out. I know what you're building. She gestured at the car. This isn't a hobby project. This is commercial technology. Potentially valuable commercial technology. How I spend my time is none of your concern. It is when it affects my project. Victoria moved closer. Here's what I think happened. You worked in electric vehicles before. Some company, some project. It ended badly, and you ran. Now you're trying to rebuild in secret, probably hoping to prove something to yourself or the world, or whoever screwed you over. Ryan's jaw clenched. And tomorrow, Victoria continued, you're meeting with investors. Arthur Bennett isn't exactly subtle about his connections. You're going to pitch this conversion system, hoping to raise enough capital to fight my development project. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? She pulled out her phone, showed him a screen. That's you, Ryan Carter, former lead systems engineer at Northbrook Technologies. You headed their EV division until 3 years ago when you abruptly resigned following personal tragedy. No social media presence since, no professional activity, nothing. Until now. Arthur appeared in the doorway. Miss Hale, I think you should leave. Mr. Bennett, still backing losing horses, I see. Victoria pocketed her phone. The injunction stands. You can fight it in court, but that takes time you don't have. Your presentation tomorrow is meaningless if you can't legally operate. The meeting's not about the garage, Ryan said. It's about the technology. Which you developed where? Using what resources? Victoria smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. Everything you've built here is tied to this property, and this property is tied to legal proceedings. Good luck explaining that to investors. She walked toward the exit, heels clicking. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Carter, your system is impressive. In another situation, I might have been interested in discussing partnership opportunities, but you chose confrontation over collaboration. You chose demolition over conversation. Victoria left without responding. Ryan read the injunction again, then crumpled it and threw it across the garage. Damn it! Arthur picked up the paper, smoothed it out. This is bad. You think? But it's not fatal. The injunction affects business operations, not intellectual property. You can still present the technology. You just can't sell anything from this location. Investors are going to ask where I developed it, where I'm manufacturing, where the business is based. Ryan paced. And the answer to all of those is a garage that's currently frozen in legal proceedings. That's not exactly confidence-inspiring. Then we change the narrative. How? Arthur thought for a moment. We emphasize that you're looking for partners, not just investors. You're not selling them a finished product from this garage. You're offering them the opportunity to build a company together. The garage is where the prototype was born, but the business will be something bigger. That's spin. That's framing, and it's true. You can't scale this operation from Hartford Street anyway. You need manufacturing facilities, supply chain partnerships, distribution networks. The garage was always just the beginning. Ryan wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Arthur was right. So we mentioned the injunction? We don't hide it, but we present it as a temporary obstacle, not a fundamental problem. And we make sure they understand that betting on you means betting on the technology and your ability to execute, not on one specific location. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. Why are you yelling? Ryan's anger deflated. Sorry, kiddo. Adult problems. Is the scary lady back? She was. She's gone now. Sophie came down the stairs, looked at the crumpled injunction in Arthur's hand. What's that? Paperwork, Ryan said. Nothing important. You're lying. You only use that voice when you're lying. He should have known better. Sophie had spent 3 years learning to read his moods, his tells, his evasions. Okay, it's important paperwork, but I'm handling it. Can I help? You already are, by being you. She wrinkled her nose. That's not a real answer. It's the only one I've got right now. Ryan checked his watch. Come on, let's get you fed. Arthur and I have work to do. Pumped. The rest of Sunday blurred past. They revised the presentation to address the injunction proactively. They rehearsed responses to hard questions. They ran the Camry through additional tests, documenting every metric. By evening, Ryan's voice was hoarse, and his hands shook from too much coffee and too little food. "That's enough," Arthur declared. You're done for today. I need to, sleep, eat, spend time with your daughter. In that order." Arthur closed the laptop. "You're as prepared as you're going to be. More rehearsal won't help. It'll just make you stale." Ryan knew he was right, but stopping felt wrong, like surrendering. What if it's not enough? Then it's not enough. But running yourself into the ground won't change that. Arthur gripped his shoulder. "Trust the work. Trust yourself. And for the love of everything, get some rest." Font. Ryan made Sophie spaghetti for dinner. She insisted on helping, which meant the kitchen ended up covered in tomato sauce and the pasta was slightly overcooked. But they ate together at the small table and talked about things that had nothing to do with garages or presentations or legal injunctions. "Marcus brought another snake to school," Sophie reported. "Ms. Patterson made him put it in the science room." "Good call. I asked if I could bring our project for show and tell." Ryan paused mid-bite. "What project?" "The electric car. It's cool. Everyone would like it." "Sophie, that's not... We can't..." He set down his fork. "That car's not a toy. It's important." "I know. That's why I want to show it." She twirled spaghetti on her fork. "You always say I should be proud of what we build." "I do say that." "So?" "So that car is part of something bigger right now. Maybe later, when things settle down." Sophie's face fell. "You mean after the meeting?" "Yeah. And if the meeting goes bad, we have to move, so there won't be a later." The logic was brutal and accurate. "The meeting's not going to go bad," Ryan said, trying to sound certain. "You don't know that." "No, but I believe it." "What's the difference?" Ryan thought about Emma, about the last conversation they'd had before the accident. She'd been worried about money, about Ryan's obsession with the Northbrook project, about whether they were building the life they actually wanted or just the life they thought they should want. "I don't know," he'd said, "but I believe it'll work out." "Belief isn't a plan," Emma had replied. She'd been right then. Maybe she was right now too. But sometimes belief was all you had. The difference, Ryan told Sophie, is that knowing means you've already seen it happen. Believing means you're willing to make it happen. Sophie considered this. "That's not a very good answer." "Yeah, I know." They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Afterward, Sophie insisted on showing Ryan her latest drawing, a detailed schematic of what she called a flying electric car that defied at least 7 laws of physics. "This part," she said, pointing to something that might have been a wing or a tentacle, "is the gravity remover." "Gravity remover." "Yeah, you turn it on and gravity goes away." "Sophie, gravity doesn't just go away." "It does in my car." She was completely serious. "You build cars that don't need gas. I build cars that don't need gravity. We're both engineers." Ryan laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. "You're absolutely right. We're both engineers." Monday morning arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. Ryan put on the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray thing Emma had bought him for a Northbrook Technologies Awards dinner, back when he still believed corporations cared about innovation. It still fit, barely, though the shoulders felt tighter than he remembered. Sophie watched him struggle with his tie. "You look fancy," she said. "I look uncomfortable." "Same thing." She hopped off her bed. "Let me fix it." Ryan knelt down. Sophie's small fingers worked the tie with surprising competence. Apparently, YouTube tutorials covered everything these days. When she finished, she stepped back to admire her work. "Perfect. Now you look like a real businessman." "I am a real businessman. You're a mechanic who's pretending to be a businessman for one day." She grinned. "It's okay. I won't tell." Arthur arrived at noon to drive them to the Fairmont. He'd rented a truck to transport the Camry. They'd be doing a live demonstration in the hotel's parking garage. The drive downtown took 40 minutes. Sophie came along because aftercare was closed for a teacher development day, and Ryan refused to leave her with a sitter on the most important day of his professional life. "I'll be quiet," Sophie promised. "You won't even know I'm there. You're never quiet. I'll be invisible, quiet." "That's not a thing." "It is now." The Fairmont Hotel towered over Copley Square, all glass and steel and architectural confidence. Arthur parked the truck in the underground garage while Ryan and Sophie entered through the main lobby. The conference room was on the third floor. Ryan checked in with the concierge, who directed them to a private waiting area outside the meeting space. Mr. Carter? A woman in hotel staff uniform approached. The investors are ready for you. You'll have the room for 2 hours. Ryan's mouth went dry. Great. Thank you. Sophie squeezed his hand. You got this, Daddy. He squeezed back. Stay here. Read your book. Arthur will check on you. I know. Go save the garage. Ryan entered the conference room. 4 people sat around a polished table. Cynthia Rodriguez, David Park, Jennifer Okonkwo, and Marcus Webb. They looked exactly like their photos. Professional, skeptical, expensive. Arthur was already there, setting up the presentation on a large screen. Mr. Carter, Cynthia said, standing to shake his hand. We've been looking forward to this. Ryan shook hands around the table, feeling like an imposter in his too tight suit. Thank you all for coming. I know your time is valuable. Arthur speaks highly of you, David said. That alone was worth the trip. Though we should note, Marcus added, that Arthur tends toward optimism. Realistic optimism, Arthur corrected. Marcus smiled. That's what all optimists say. Ryan moved to the front of the room. His hands wanted to shake. He forced them still. 3 years ago, he began, I walked away from the automotive industry because I didn't believe in it anymore. The companies, the politics, the short-term thinking, I thought I was done. He clicked to the first slide, a photo of the garage. But some problems don't let you walk away. 280 million cars in America, 90% of them running on fossil fuels. An infrastructure gap that makes electric vehicle adoption impractical for most people, and a clock that's running out. Next slide. The conversion system, fully installed in the Camry. This is a universal electric vehicle conversion platform. It retrofits any standard passenger vehicle to full electric operation in under 6 hours at a cost of less than $5,000 per unit. Cynthia leaned forward. Jennifer made a note. David's expression remained neutral. Marcus frowned. That's a bold claim, Marcus said. It's a tested claim. I have 247 completed installations with a 95% success rate. Installation by you? By me, yes. But the process is standardized. I've documented every step. Ryan walked them through the technical specifications, battery chemistry, power management, thermal regulation, safety systems. Every question they raised, he had data to answer. 30 minutes in, Jennifer interrupted. These are impressive numbers, Mr. Carter, but let's address the elephant in the room. She consulted her notes. Your property is currently under legal injunction. How does that affect this venture? Here it was. Ryan didn't flinch. It doesn't. The injunction freezes business operations at that specific location. It doesn't affect intellectual property rights or my ability to form a new company. The garage was where I developed the prototype. The business will be something much larger. But you can't currently manufacture there, Marcus pressed. Correct. Which is why I'm looking for partners who can help me scale production properly. This was never going to be a garage operation long term. I need manufacturing facilities, supply chain management, quality control systems, things that require capital and expertise I don't have alone. What happens if you lose the property entirely? Cynthia asked. Then I lose a building. I don't lose the technology or the knowledge or 3 years of development work. Ryan met her eyes. The garage is sentimental. The business is practical. I know the difference. David smiled slightly. Good answer. They continued for another hour. Financial projections, market analysis, competitive landscape, regulatory considerations. Ryan felt like he was being dissected by experts who knew exactly where to cut. Finally, Arthur suggested they move to the parking garage for the live demonstration. The Camry sat under fluorescent lights, looking decidedly ordinary. Ryan popped the hood. The investors crowded around, examining the conversion system. Marcus took photos. Jennifer asked detailed questions about component sourcing. Cynthia wanted to know about maintenance intervals. Can we see it run? David asked. Ryan handed him the keys. Drive it yourself. David's eyebrows rose. Seriously? You're considering putting money into this technology. You should know what you're buying. David drove, then Jennifer drove, then Cynthia and Marcus. each of them testing acceleration, handling, the user interface on the dashboard display. When they finished, Marcus pulled Ryan aside. The system works, that's obvious, but the legal situation troubles me. I understand. If Hale Development succeeds in taking your property, you lose your workspace, your test facility, potentially your ability to continue development. I have backups, designs, data, documentation, everything stored off-site. That's smart, but it's also reactive. Marcus crossed his arms. What's your proactive strategy for dealing with Hale? Ryan hesitated. Survive until I have enough capital to fight them properly. That's not a strategy, that's hope. Then what would you suggest? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Make yourself too valuable to destroy. If your technology gains enough visibility, enough investor support, enough public interest, Hale Development can't simply demolish you without major backlash. Bad press, community opposition, political pressure. You stop being an obstacle and start being a liability. How do I do that in the time I have? You don't. But we do. Marcus pulled out his phone. If we invest, we're not just funding your company. We're protecting our investment. That means lawyers, PR, strategic partnerships, things you can't afford alone. Ryan felt something loosen in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or just relief that someone finally understood. They returned to the conference room. The investors huddled in the corner, speaking in low voices. Ryan stood by the window, watching traffic move through Copley Square, and tried not to think about what failure would mean. Arthur joined him. You did well. We'll see. No, you did well. Whatever happens next, you presented yourself and your work honestly. That's all you can control. The investors broke their huddle. Cynthia gestured for Ryan to rejoin them at the table. Mr. Carter, we've discussed your proposal. We have some questions about valuation and equity structure, but overall, we're interested. Ryan's heart hammered. All of you? All of us, David confirmed, pending due diligence and final term negotiations. Jennifer slid a paper across the table. Preliminary commitment letter, $9 million across the four of us. We'll finalize details over the next week, but this gives you something to work with immediately. Ryan stared at the number, $9 million. It was real. It was actually real. There's one condition, Marcus said. We want you to go public with this. Not a full product launch, but a press release. Technology announcement. Create visibility and community interest. Make it harder for Hale Development to proceed quietly. When? This week, before they can file additional motions or escalate legal action. Ryan looked at Arthur, who nodded. Okay, we'll do it. They shook hands around the table. Cynthia handed him a business card. David promised to send over term sheets. Jennifer wanted to schedule a facility tour once they found a manufacturing location. When it was over, when the investors had left and the conference room was empty, except for Ryan and Arthur, Ryan sat down heavily in one of the expensive chairs and just breathed. We did it, Arthur said quietly. Yeah, we did. Now comes the hard part. Ryan laughed, exhausted. That wasn't the hard part? That was proving it could work. Now you have to actually build a company, scale production, manage investors, fight legal battles, navigate publicity. Arthur sat down beside him. The garage was safe, Ryan. Private. Controlled. What comes next is chaos. I know. Are you ready for that? Ryan thought about Sophie waiting outside with her book, about the garage on Hartford Street, about Emma, who'd wanted him to let go of this world. No, he said honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. They found Sophie in the waiting area, drawing in her sketchbook. She looked up when they approached. Well? Ryan knelt down. We got the money. Sophie threw her arms around his neck so hard she nearly knocked him over. I knew it. I knew you could do it. Arthur grinned. Celebration dinner? Celebration dinner, Ryan agreed. They went to a diner near the garage. Sophie's choice. Because she wanted pancakes and didn't care that it was 4 p.m. She ordered a stack with chocolate chips and whipped cream, and when it arrived, she insisted Ryan and Arthur each take a bite. We all won, she declared. We all celebrate. Ryan ate his bite of pancake and watched his daughter glow with happiness and thought, this is what winning feels like. Not perfect, not safe, not guaranteed to last, but real. And his. And worth fighting for. His phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your investor meeting. Shame about the injunction. Let's talk before this gets uglier. VM. Victoria Hale. Ryan deleted the message and turned off his phone. Tomorrow he'd deal with her. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to build a company from nothing. Tomorrow he'd face whatever chaos was coming. But tonight he was eating pancakes with his daughter and watching her plan a future that included gravity removers and flying cars. And that was enough. The press release went out Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. By 9:15, Ryan's phone was ringing non-stop. The first call came from a reporter at the Boston Globe, then Channel 5 News, then a blogger who ran a clean energy website, then 3 more reporters, 2 podcasters, and someone who claimed to represent a documentary film crew. Ryan sat in the garage office, staring at the phone like it had turned into a live grenade. "Don't answer," Arthur advised, scrolling through his own flood of emails. "Let me handle media for now. You're not ready for interviews. I can talk to reporters. You can talk about engineering. You can't talk about corporate strategy, legal positioning, or investor relations without accidentally saying something that'll come back to bite us." Arthur forwarded an email. "Trust me on this. I've watched brilliant people destroy their own companies in 30-second sound bites." Ryan's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "How long does this last?" "The initial frenzy? 48 hours maybe. Then it'll settle into a background hum unless something new happens." Arthur glanced up. "Which reminds me, we need to schedule that facility tour for the investors. They'll want to see progress within the week." "What facility?" "We don't have a facility." "Then we need to find one, fast." Sophie wandered in from the garage, wearing safety goggles that were 3 sizes too big and carrying a wrench almost as long as her arm. "Daddy, the phone won't stop making noise." "I know, kiddo, it's annoying. Is it because of the announcement?" "Yeah." She thought about this. "Are we famous now?" "No, the technology is getting attention. That's different." "Taylor's going to be so jealous," Sophie grinned. "Her dad's just a boring lawyer." "Sophie, I'm kidding, mostly." She set down the wrench. "Can I answer the phone next time? I want to tell people about the gravity remover." "Absolutely not," Arthur laughed. "I don't know, Ryan. She might handle it better than you would." The landline in the office rang, a number Ryan actually recognized. He picked up. "Carter's Auto." "Mr. Carter, Daniel Mercer." Ryan's jaw tightened. Victoria Hale's executive director. The man who'd threatened him over the phone 2 weeks ago. "What do you want?" "I want to discuss your recent press release. Specifically, the part where you announced a $9 million investment in technology developed at a property currently under legal injunction." "The technology isn't under injunction, just the property." "A distinction our lawyers find interesting." Papers rustled on Daniel's end. "Tell me, Mr. Carter, did you disclose the legal situation to your investors?" "That's none of your business. It is when those investors might have grounds for fraud claims if they weren't properly informed about material risks." Ryan's grip on the phone tightened. "Are you threatening me or them?" "I'm clarifying reality. Your little publicity stunt doesn't change the fundamental situation. Hale Development owns the future of Hartford Street. You're just delaying the inevitable." "Is there a point to this call?" "The point is that Ms. Hale is willing to negotiate. Despite your antagonistic approach, she recognizes that your technology has value. We're prepared to make a formal acquisition offer." "I'm not selling." "You haven't heard the terms." "Don't need to." "Not interested." "Mr. Carter, you're operating from a position of profound weakness that you don't seem to understand. You have no manufacturing capacity, no supply chain, no distribution network. You're one man in a garage with a prototype and some investors who will disappear the moment things get difficult. We can offer you resources, infrastructure, immediate scale. All you have to do is be reasonable." "Reasonable? Like you were when you tried to intimidate me at midnight?" Silence on the other end. "I see Ms. Hale didn't mention that conversation," Ryan continued. "Ask her about it. Then tell her my answer is no." He hung up before Daniel could respond. Arthur was watching him carefully. "That sounded productive?" "They want to buy the technology." "Of course they do. Your press release probably scared them. If you succeed, you're not just saving one garage, you're creating a business that could complicate their entire development timeline." Arthur pulled up something on his laptop. "Which means they'll escalate." "How?" "Legal pressure. Media counter-narratives. Maybe they try to poach your investors. Maybe they dig into your past at Northbrook, looking for ammunition." Arthur's expression was grim. Daniel Mercer doesn't strike me as someone who accepts losing gracefully. So what do we do? We move faster than they can react, find a facility, start hiring, build momentum they can't stop. Arthur checked his watch. I have 3 properties lined up for tours this afternoon. Industrial spaces in Somerville. Not glamorous, but functional. Ryan thought about the garage. His father had bought this building 42 years ago, with money saved from 2 jobs and a dream of being his own boss. The walls carried decades of history, grease stains from 1,000 repairs, marks where Sophie had measured her height every birthday, the spot where Emma had painted a mural one summer afternoon. Leaving felt like betrayal. Ryan, Arthur's voice was gentle. The garage can stay. You can keep it as your workshop, your home base, but the company needs room to grow. I know. Then let's go look at spaces. Assad. The first property was a disaster. Leaking roof, electrical system that probably violated 6 building codes, and a smell that suggested something had died in the walls recently. The second property was better. Structurally sound, decent loading dock, enough square footage for initial manufacturing, but the landlord wanted a 5-year lease with no exit clause, and Ryan couldn't commit to 5 years when he didn't know if he'd survive 5 months. The third property sat at the edge of Somerville, wedged between a craft brewery and a warehouse that made custom bicycles. It was smaller than the second option, but the space felt right the moment Ryan walked in. High ceilings, good natural light, an office area that could become a proper engineering lab. The landlord was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Chen, who'd run a printing business in the space for 30 years before retiring. I'm not interested in long-term corporate tenants, she said, showing them around. I want someone who'll actually use the space for building things, not just storing inventory or running a call center. We're definitely building things, Ryan assured her. What kind of things? Electric vehicle conversion systems. Patricia's eyes lit up. The thing in the news? That's you? That's me. Well, damn, that's actually useful. She kicked a support column affectionately. This building deserves useful. Month-to-month lease, first 3 months at half rate while you're getting established. After that, we renegotiate based on your actual needs. Arthur blinked. Month to month? You're serious? I'm 71 years old. I don't have time for bullshit. Patricia pulled out a single sheet of paper, a lease agreement handwritten in neat block letters. Standard terms, no games. You keep the place clean, pay on time, and don't burn it down. We'll get along fine. Ryan read the agreement. It was almost suspiciously simple. Why are you doing this? He asked. Because 40 years ago, someone gave me a chance when every bank said no. I figure I owe the universe one. Patricia handed him a pen. Plus, my grandson drives a gas-guzzling pickup that's killing the planet. Maybe you can fix that. Ryan signed the lease. They moved into the new facility on Thursday. Arthur hired a small crew to help transport equipment from the garage. Carefully, because half of it was held together with hope and zip ties. Sophie supervised from a folding chair, offering commentary on everyone's lifting technique. You're going to drop that, she told one of the movers carrying a battery testing station. I'm not going to drop it. You're holding it wrong. The mover adjusted his grip. Sophie nodded approvingly. Better. You can continue. Arthur watched this exchange with barely suppressed amusement. She's terrifying. She gets it from her mother, Ryan said. By evening, the new space was functional. Not pretty, not organized, but operational. Ryan stood in the middle of the empty floor, imagining what it could become. Assembly stations, quality control area, engineering lab, a real company. His phone rang. Unknown number, but by now he'd learned to check the caller ID carefully. This one he recognized. Marcus? Ryan, I hope I'm not interrupting. Just finishing the move into the new facility. Good. That's actually why I'm calling. I've been thinking about our conversation at the Fairmont, about making yourself too valuable to destroy. Yeah? I have a proposal. There's a clean energy conference in New York next month. Major players, automotive manufacturers, battery companies, charging infrastructure firms. I can get you a speaking slot. Ryan's stomach lurched. Speaking? In front of how many people? 300, maybe 4. Industry leaders, investors, press. It's the perfect platform to demonstrate your technology to people who can actually help you scale. Marcus, I'm an engineer, not a public speaker. You presented to us just fine. That was 4 people in a conference room. This is hundreds of strangers. Which is exactly why it matters. Victoria Hale and Daniel Mercer are betting you'll stay small and isolated. Prove them wrong. Show the industry you're serious. Ryan looked around the empty facility. A week ago, he'd been hiding in a garage. Now he had investors, a lease, and apparently an invitation to speak at a major conference. When do you need an answer? Tonight. The conference organizers need to finalize the agenda. That's not much time to think. Ryan, Marcus's voice went serious. Hale Development is going to come at you hard. You know that, right? The press release was just the opening move. They'll dig, they'll attack, they'll try to discredit you and your technology. The only defense is to build a reputation bigger than their ability to tear it down. Ryan closed his eyes. He thought about Sophie asking if they were famous, about Emma's voice in his head saying he was always chasing something that would destroy them, about his father's garage, sitting empty now except for a few tools and a lot of memories. Okay, he said, I'll do it. Good man, I'll send details tomorrow. After Marcus hung up, Ryan stood in the quiet facility for a long time, wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. The next morning brought 2 developments simultaneously. First, the Boston Globe ran a feature story about Ryan's technology. The reporter had done actual research, interviewed Arthur, reviewed the technical specifications, even talked to one of the investors. The article was balanced and fair, which somehow made it more powerful than simple hype would have been. Second, Hale Development Corporation issued a statement. Arthur read it aloud from his laptop, his voice tight with anger. While we appreciate innovation in the clean energy sector, recent claims about electric vehicle conversion technology developed on Hartford Street appear to misrepresent both the viability of the approach and the legal status of the property in question. Hale Development has reason to believe the technology may infringe on existing patents held by Northbrook Technologies, and we encourage investors to conduct thorough due diligence before committing capital to potentially compromised intellectual property. Ryan felt ice spread through his chest. They're going after Northbrook? They're implying Northbrook might go after you. That's different. Arthur kept reading. But they're also planting doubt with your investors. If Cynthia or David or any of them start worrying about patent litigation, they could pull their commitments. Can they do that? The patents are clean. I documented everything. Clean doesn't matter if people believe they're dirty. Perception is reality in investor relations. Arthur closed the laptop. We need to respond, fast and factual. Kill this narrative before it spreads. How? We release your documentation, timestamp notebooks, patent filings, termination agreements from Northbrook. Everything that proves you developed this technology after leaving the company. Ryan hesitated. That's a lot of personal history. Would you rather protect your privacy or your company? The answer should have been obvious, but it wasn't. Those notebooks contained 3 years of grief and rebuilding. Late nights after Sophie went to sleep. Failed tests and breakthrough moments. Sketches drawn while sitting at Emma's grave because he couldn't think anywhere else. Making it all public felt like stripping naked in front of strangers. Do it, Ryan said finally. Release whatever you need to. Nut. The documentation went online that afternoon. Within hours, multiple engineering blogs and clean tech websites had analyzed the patents, confirming that Ryan's work was completely independent of his Northbrook projects. But Hale Development wasn't done. That evening, a local news station ran a segment questioning whether Ryan's garage met proper safety standards for technology development. They showed footage of the Hartford Street building, carefully shot to emphasize the rusted roof and cracked concrete, and interviewed a concerned neighbor who expressed worry about dangerous experiments happening in a residential area. Ryan watched the segment with growing rage. The concerned neighbor was someone he'd never seen before in his life. They're manufacturing opposition, Arthur said quietly. This is insane. This is corporate warfare, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. Sophie appeared in the doorway, backpack on her shoulders. Daddy? Kids at school are saying mean things. Ryan's anger evaporated instantly, replaced by cold fear. What kind of mean things? That you're a liar. That the electric car is fake. That we're going to lose our house. Her voice was small. Taylor said her dad said we're scamming people. Ryan pulled her into a hug. None of that's true. Then why are they saying it? Because sometimes people attack things they don't understand, or things that scare them. The car scares them? Change scares them, and what we're building would change a lot of things. Sophie pulled back, looking up at him. Are we going to lose? No. How do you know? Because we're not fighting alone anymore. We have investors, partners, people who believe in what we're doing, and because I'm not giving up. Sophie studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I'm not giving up either. After she went to bed, Ryan sat in the new facility's office and tried to answer the 73 emails that had arrived since the news segment aired. Some were supportive, some were hostile. Some were from lawyers offering their services, journalists requesting interviews, or companies proposing partnerships. One email stood out. The sender was listed only as NT_admin with a Northbrook Technologies domain. Ryan opened it. Mr. Carter, we've been following recent media coverage regarding your electric vehicle conversion technology. While we appreciate your contributions during your tenure at Northbrook, we must clarify that certain core concepts underlying your current work may overlap with proprietary research conducted during your employment. We request a meeting to discuss potential licensing arrangements and ensure there are no intellectual property conflicts. Please contact our legal department at your earliest convenience. Ryan read it 3 times, feeling his world tilt. They were coming after him. Not Hale Development, his former employer. The company that had buried his original EV project, pushed him out after Emma died, and spent 3 years pretending he'd never existed. Now they wanted licensing fees. He forwarded the email to Arthur with a single line. We have a problem. Arthur called immediately. I see it. What do? We get our own lawyers. Real ones, not just me pretending I remember law school. Arthur was already typing. I know a firm in Cambridge that specializes in patent defense. They're expensive, but they're vicious. We need vicious right now. The investors. We'll hear about this whether we tell them or not. Better it comes from us with a plan than from Northbrook's PR department. Arthur paused. Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Is there any possibility, any at all, that some of your current work overlaps with what you did at Northbrook? No. I used completely different battery chemistry, different control systems, different architecture. The only thing that's similar is the basic concept of converting gas cars to electric, and that's not patentable. It's like saying you invented the idea of putting wheels on vehicles. Good. That's what I thought, but I had to confirm. Arthur's typing continued. I'm scheduling a meeting with the law firm for tomorrow morning. Bring every piece of documentation you have. Everything. After the call ended, Ryan sat in the dark office, listening to the building settle around him. The brewery next door was closing up. He could hear voices, laughter, the sound of kegs being moved. Normal people doing normal work, going home to normal lives. He'd wanted that once. After Emma died, he'd wanted nothing more than to disappear into routine and never face anything complicated again. But routine hadn't saved him. Sophie had. And the work. And the slow, painful process of building something that mattered. Now people were trying to take it away again, and he was supposed to what? Just accept it? Walk away a second time? His phone buzzed. Text from a number he didn't recognize. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But this doesn't have to be a war. Call me. Let's talk like adults. VH Victoria Hale. Again. Ryan stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed a response. What's there to talk about? The reply came almost instantly. Solutions, your technology, my resources, a partnership that benefits everyone instead of destroying us both. Your company just spent 2 days attacking my credibility. Daniel overstepped. I've corrected that. By issuing a statement calling me a patent thief? By trying to protect a $60 million project from an unknown variable? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe we both were. Can we at least have a conversation? Ryan's finger hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed not to trust her. Victoria Hale was the enemy, the person trying to demolish his garage, the face of everything wrong with corporate development priorities. But she was also the only person who could make the Hartford Street situation disappear with a single phone call. When? He typed. Tomorrow, noon. Somewhere neutral. Your choice. Ryan thought about the new facility, about Sophie's school situation, about the Northbrook email and the mounting legal pressure and the conference presentation he'd agreed to without really understanding what it would require. The cafe on Newbury Street, Café Versailles. I'll be there. Ryan put down the phone and immediately regretted agreeing to the meeting, but it was too late to take it back now. So, the law firm occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Kendall Square. Ryan arrived with Arthur and 2 bankers' boxes full of documentation, feeling wildly out of place among the expensive suits and minimalist furniture. The attorney who met them was a woman named Sarah Vega, late 40s, sharp eyes, and a handshake that suggested she could break bones if necessary. Mr. Carter, Mr. Bennett, I've reviewed the preliminary materials you sent. She led them to a conference room. The good news is that Northbrook's claim appears to be phishing. They're using vague language about core concepts and potential overlap because they don't have specific patent violations to cite. And the bad news? Ryan asked. The bad news is that fighting them, even if you're completely in the right, will cost between $200,000 and $500,000. Maybe more if they decide to make it ugly. Sarah opened a laptop. They're betting you can't afford that kind of legal battle. Most small operations can't. I have investors who will run cost-benefit analysis and might decide it's cheaper to cut their losses than fund a protracted patent war. Sarah pulled up a document. What Northbrook is really doing is creating leverage. They want you scared and desperate enough to accept a licensing deal that gives them control over your technology. Ryan felt sick. So they win either way. Not necessarily. If we can demonstrate clearly and publicly that their claim has no merit, they might back down rather than risk losing in court and establishing precedent. Sarah turned the laptop toward him. Which brings me to my recommendation. We file a declaratory judgment action. Which is? Essentially, you sue them first. You ask the court to declare that your technology doesn't infringe their patents. It puts them on defense instead of offense and forces them to either prove their claim or withdraw it. Arthur leaned forward. How long does that take? 6 months minimum. Could be longer. We don't have 6 months, Ryan said. Hale Development is still trying to take the garage. The conference is in 3 weeks. I need to move forward, not get stuck in legal limbo. Sarah nodded. Then we need to make Northbrook more afraid of publicity than they are interested in licensing fees. Do you have media contacts? Some. After the press release. Use them. Tell your story. Not just the technology, the human element. Father raising daughter alone. Building something important from nothing. Former employer coming after him despite having no legitimate claim. Make it a David versus Goliath narrative. Ryan shook his head. That's not what this is about. Maybe not for you, but for the public. For potential customers and supporters. That narrative matters. Sarah's expression softened slightly. I know you're a private person, Mr. Carter, but privacy is a luxury you can't afford right now. Your best defense is sunlight. Yikes. Ryan left the law firm feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. Arthur walked beside him in silence until they reached the parking garage. You okay? Arthur asked. No, but I'll manage. Sarah's right about the publicity angle. If you're going to that conference anyway, use it. Tell the story on your terms before someone else tells it on theirs. Ryan unlocked his truck. I didn't build this technology to become some media personality. I know. But you built it in a world where media matters, whether you like it or not. Arthur gripped his shoulder. Emma would have hated all of this. The attention, the conflict, the risk. But she also would have been proud of what you're fighting for. The mention of Emma hit harder than Ryan expected. You think so? I know so. She believed in you even when you didn't believe in yourself. She'd want you to win. Ryan drove to Café Versailles 20 minutes early. He ordered coffee he didn't drink and sat at a table by the window, watching people pass on the sidewalk outside. Victoria Hale arrived exactly at noon. She wore a navy suit, minimal jewelry, and an expression that suggested she was also questioning the wisdom of this meeting. She ordered tea at the counter, then joined Ryan at the table. Thank you for coming, she said. I'm here. Talk. Victoria set down her tea carefully. I owe you an apology. Multiple apologies, actually. For the injunction, for Daniel's overreach, for the media statement. None of that was necessary or fair. You're right, it wasn't. In my defense, and I'm not sure I have one, I've spent 5 years trying to prove I deserve to run my father's company. Every project, every decision, every success has been scrutinized and second-guessed. The Hartford Street development is my first major solo initiative, and I let the pressure turn me into someone I don't particularly like. Ryan studied her face. She looked tired. Actually tired, not just stressed. There were shadows under her eyes that expensive makeup couldn't quite hide. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because I looked into your background. Really looked, not just surface research. I know about Northbrook, about your wife, about the project they buried and the way they pushed you out when you were grieving." Victoria met his eyes. "I know what it's like to have corporations treat people like obstacles instead of human beings. And I'm ashamed that I did the same thing to you." Ryan didn't know what to say to that. Victoria continued, "I also had my people analyze your conversion system. It's brilliant, Ryan, truly, and it could work alongside my development project instead of against it. Imagine Hartford Street rebuilt with EV infrastructure integrated from the ground up, charging stations, conversion facilities, maybe even a showroom for your technology. The garage could stay, renovated, preserved as the origin point. And what do you get out of this? A partnership with innovative technology that makes my project more valuable, positive press instead of conflict, and maybe a chance to fix the mistakes I've made." Victoria pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. "Proposal, joint venture. You retain majority ownership of your technology and company. Hale Development provides capital, facilities, and infrastructure support. The garage stays. Hartford Street gets developed, but with your work as a centerpiece instead of an obstacle." Ryan opened the folder. The numbers were substantial, more money than the investors had committed, plus resources he desperately needed. It was everything he'd been fighting for, which made him deeply suspicious. "What about Northbrook?" he asked. "We'll provide legal support. Our attorneys are better and meaner than theirs." "And Daniel Mercer? No longer with the company as of this morning." Ryan looked up sharply. "You fired him?" "I asked for his resignation. He gave it." Victoria's jaw tightened. "He was making decisions without my knowledge and creating problems I'm still trying to untangle. That ends now." Ryan closed the folder. "I need to think about this." "Of course. Take the weekend. Talk to your investors, your lawyer, whoever you trust. I just ask that you consider it fairly instead of rejecting it because you hate what I represent." "I don't hate you." "No, but you hate what I tried to do." "That's fair." Victoria stood. "One more thing. That conference Marcus Webb mentioned. I'll be there, speaking on a panel about sustainable urban development. If you decide to work together, we could coordinate our presentations. Show a united front. And if I decide not to work together, then I'll watch your presentation from the audience and try not to think about missed opportunities." She picked up her tea. "Either way, I hope you kill it up there. The industry needs people who actually care about building things instead of just making money from them." She left before Ryan could respond. He sat alone in the cafe for another hour, staring at the folder, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The obvious move was to say yes. Take the resources, save the garage, build the company with actual infrastructure instead of hope and determination. But partnerships meant compromise, shared decisions, giving someone else, especially someone who'd already tried to destroy him, power over his work. His phone rang. Sophie's school. "Mr. Carter? This is Principal Morrison. I'm calling because Sophie got into an altercation at lunch today." Ryan's heart sank. "She okay?" "She's fine, but she pushed another student. Quite hard, apparently." "Sophie doesn't push people. What happened?" According to witnesses, the other student was teasing her about the news coverage, something about her father being a fraud. Sophie told him to stop. He didn't. So she pushed him into a lunch table. Ryan closed his eyes. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He found Sophie in the principal's office, arms crossed, glaring at nothing. The other student, a boy Ryan recognized as Taylor's older brother, had a small bruise forming on his shoulder. "Sophie," Ryan said quietly, "he called you a liar." "I don't care what he called me." "Well, I do." She looked up at him, eyes fierce. "He said we're scamming people and stealing money, and you're going to go to jail, so I pushed him." Principal Morrison cleared his throat. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for physical altercations." He has a zero-tolerance policy for his daughter hearing lies about her father, Ryan said, struggling to keep his voice level. What's being done about the student who was bullying her? We're addressing that separately. Then address this separately, too. My daughter defended herself against harassment. That's not the same as starting a fight. The principal and Ryan stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Morrison sighed. Sophie, you're suspended for the rest of the day. If this happens again, the consequences will be more severe. Do you understand? Yes, sir. In the truck, Sophie was silent until they were halfway home. Are you mad? She asked. No. Principal Morrison was mad. Principal Morrison doesn't have reporters calling him a fraud on the news. Ryan glanced at her. But kiddo, you can't push people, even when they're being jerks. What am I supposed to do? Walk away. Tell a teacher. Come home and tell me so I can handle it. But that doesn't make them stop. No, but it also doesn't get you suspended. Ryan pulled into the garage driveway. Listen to me. The next few weeks are going to be hard. People are going to say things about me, about the company, about our family. Most of it will be lies or exaggerations, and it's going to hurt. So what do? We keep building. We prove them wrong not by fighting, but by succeeding. Can you do that? Sophie considered this seriously. Can I still push people if they really deserve it? Sophie, fine, no pushing, but I'm allowed to give them mean looks. Mean looks are acceptable. That evening, Ryan called Marcus Webb. I need advice, Ryan said, and I need you to be honest, even if I don't want to hear it. Always. What's the question? Victoria Hale offered me a partnership, resources, capital, legal support. Everything I need, in exchange for working with Hale Development instead of against them. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What does your gut say? My gut says not to trust someone who spent 2 weeks trying to destroy me. And your brain? My brain says I can't afford to turn down that kind of support based on pride. Those aren't contradictory positions, Marcus said. Trust and partnership aren't the same thing. You can work with someone without trusting them completely. You just need strong contracts and clear boundaries. So you think I should do it? I think you should evaluate it like any business decision. Does the benefit outweigh the risk? Can you protect your core interests? What happens if the partnership fails? Marcus paused. But Ryan, here's the thing nobody tells you about partnerships. They're marriages. And like marriages, they work best when both people genuinely want the same thing. So ask yourself, does Victoria Hale actually want what you want, or is she just trying to neutralize a threat? Ryan thought about Victoria's face in the cafe, the tiredness, the apology that felt genuine even though he didn't want it to be. I don't know, he admitted. Then find out. Before you sign anything, make her prove she's serious. Actions, not words. After hanging up, Ryan sat in the quiet garage and thought about choices and consequences and the difference between being smart and being right. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Forgot to mention, I spoke to Northbrook's CEO this afternoon. Told him their patent claim was baseless, and if they pursued it, Hale Development would consider it hostile action against a potential partner. He agreed to review their legal strategy. Translation, they're backing off. Ryan stared at the message. She'd threatened Northbrook Technologies. For him. He typed back, why? Because it was the right thing to do. And because I'm trying to prove I mean what I said. Think about the proposal. Ryan put down the phone and looked around the garage. 42 years of history, 3 years of rebuilding, Sophie's height marks on the wall, Emma's faded mural. Everything worth saving. Maybe partnerships weren't about trust. Maybe they were about finding someone willing to fight for the same things you were, even if their reasons were different. He picked up Victoria's proposal folder and started reading. Really reading this time. The contract negotiations took 3 days. 3 days of lawyers speaking a language that barely sounded like English, Arthur pushing back on clause after clause, and Ryan developing a headache that felt permanent. Victoria attended every session, sitting across the conference table in her Cambridge attorney's office, occasionally interjecting when her own lawyers got too aggressive. Sarah Vega matched them point for point, protecting Ryan's interests with the precision of a surgeon. Clause 17 needs revision, Sarah said on the second day, highlighting a section. As written, Hale Development could force technology transfer if the partnership dissolves. Victoria's lead attorney, a man named Thomas Reichert, who looked like he billed by the breath, shook his head. That's standard protection language. Standard for acquisition, not partnership. Mr. Carter retains full ownership of his intellectual property, regardless of partnership status. Non-negotiable. Thomas looked at Victoria. She nodded. Fine. We'll revise. 12 hours later, they hit another wall. The exclusivity period is too broad, Arthur said, pointing at Clause 23. You're asking Ryan to commit all EV conversion technology to this partnership for 7 years. That's not reasonable. It's necessary to protect our investment, Thomas countered. If Mr. Carter can develop competing technology outside the partnership, it undermines the entire arrangement. Then limit it to this specific system architecture, Sarah suggested. Future innovations remain his unless they directly duplicate this work. The back and forth continued until Ryan wanted to flip the table and walk out, but he didn't. Because buried in all the legal language was something that mattered. The garage stayed. Hartford Street got developed, but with the conversion facility as an anchor tenant instead of a demolition target. So if he didn't have to change schools, the investors stayed committed. And Northbrook's threatened lawsuit had quietly disappeared. On the third day, they reached agreement. Ryan signed the final contract at 6:15 in the evening, his hand cramping from 3 days of initialing pages. Victoria signed opposite him. Their attorneys witnessed. Arthur looked exhausted but satisfied. Partners, Victoria said, extending her hand. Ryan shook it. Partners. The word felt strange in his mouth. 2 weeks ago, this woman had been the enemy. Now she was tied to his company, his technology, his future. He wasn't sure if that was progress or insanity. The news broke the next morning. Joint press release from Carter Electric Conversion and Hale Development Corporation announcing a strategic partnership to develop sustainable vehicle technology integrated with urban redevelopment. Ryan's phone exploded before he finished his first coffee. The first call was from Cynthia Rodriguez. I just saw the announcement. You didn't think to mention you were negotiating with Hale? It happened fast, and I cleared it with Sarah before signing. Sarah Vega is a patent attorney, not an investor relations specialist. Cynthia's voice was tight. This changes our risk assessment, Ryan. We committed capital based on you being an independent venture, not a subsidiary of a development corporation. It's a partnership, not an acquisition. I retain majority ownership and full control of the technology. On paper, maybe. But partnerships have a way of shifting power dynamics. Hale Development has resources you need. That creates dependency, which creates leverage. Papers rustled on her end. I'm not pulling my commitment yet, but I need to see the actual contract before our next board meeting. The second call was from David Park, who was more measured but equally concerned. The third was from Jennifer Okonkwo, who wanted detailed clarification on how the partnership affected the environmental mission. By noon, Ryan had spent 4 hours explaining the same decision in slightly different words to people who all thought they knew better than he did. Arthur found him in the Somerville facility, sitting on the floor with his back against a wall, staring at nothing. Investors giving you hell? Arthur asked. They think I sold out. Did you? Ryan looked up sharply. You were there for every negotiation. You know what we got. I know what the contract says. I'm asking what you feel. Arthur sat down beside him, joints popping. Because feelings matter in business, even when people pretend they don't. Ryan was quiet for a long time. I feel like I made a deal with someone I don't fully trust because I didn't have better options. I feel like I'm compromising principles I didn't even know I had until they were threatened. And I feel like no matter what I do, someone's going to think I made the wrong choice. Welcome to leadership. It doesn't get easier. That's not encouraging. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be true. Arthur pulled out his phone, showed Ryan something. Look at this. It was a forum post on an EV enthusiast site. Someone had written a long analysis of Ryan's conversion system, comparing it favorably to existing retrofit options and praising the partnership with Hale Development as a smart scaling strategy. That's one random person on the internet, Ryan said. One of 800 comments on that thread, most of them positive. The investors are worried because investors always worry. That's their job. But the people who actually care about the technology, they're excited. Arthur pocketed his phone. You made the right call. Now you have to execute on it. Well, Sophie's suspension ended on Friday. Ryan drove her to school, watching her stare out the window in silence. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." She shrugged. "Kids are still saying stuff. I just don't push them anymore." Ryan pulled into the school parking lot, but didn't let her out yet. "What kind of stuff?" "That you're working with the bad people now, that you gave up, that the garage is going to get destroyed anyway." Sophie finally looked at him. "They're wrong, right?" "About the garage getting destroyed? Yeah, they're wrong. It's staying. But you did make a deal with the scary lady." "I made a deal with Victoria Hale, yes. Because sometimes the person who starts as an enemy can become an ally if both of you want the same thing." Sophie frowned, processing this. "Do you want the same thing?" "I think so. We both want Hartford Street to be better. We just had different ideas about how to make that happen. Now we're trying to combine those ideas." "And you trust her?" The question hit harder than it should have. Ryan thought about Victoria sitting across from him in negotiations, occasionally overruling her own lawyers to make the deal fairer, about her threatening Northbrook on his behalf, about the tiredness in her eyes that suggested she was fighting battles he didn't fully understand. "I trust that she'll do what's best for her company," Ryan said carefully. "And right now, what's best for her company is making our partnership work. So yeah, I trust her enough." Sophie unbuckled her seatbelt. "Okay. But if she turns out to be bad again, I'm allowed to say I told you so." "Deal." Ryan watched her walk into the building, backpack bouncing, blonde hair catching the morning sun. A week ago, she'd pushed a kid for insulting her father. Now she was processing corporate partnership dynamics like a tiny business consultant. He wasn't sure if that was impressive or concerning. Key. The conference was 2 weeks away. Ryan spent every available hour preparing his presentation, rehearsing in front of Arthur and the investors, refining slides until he could recite every word in his sleep. Victoria called 3 days before they were scheduled to fly to New York. "I'm looking at the conference agenda," she said. "You're presenting at 2 o'clock on Saturday. I'm on a panel at 4. We should coordinate messaging." "What kind of coordination?" "Make sure we're not contradicting each other. Emphasize the partnership benefits. Show that innovative technology and responsible development can coexist." Ryan switched his phone to speaker and pulled up the agenda on his laptop. "My presentation is technical. Conversion process, performance data, cost analysis. I'm not doing a sales pitch for Hale Development. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to acknowledge that scaling requires infrastructure, which is what the partnership provides. That's not sales, it's reality." She had a point, much as Ryan hated to admit it. "Fine, I'll add a slide about manufacturing and distribution partnerships. Generic language, not specifically promoting your company." "That works. Thank you." Victoria paused. "Ryan, I know this is uncomfortable, working together after everything that's happened, but I genuinely believe we can build something important if we both commit to it." "I am committed. That's why I signed the contract." "Commitment and belief aren't the same thing. You can be legally bound to something without actually believing in it." Ryan thought about Emma again, about all the conversations they'd had about his work at Northbrook, about whether he believed in the company's mission or just liked having a prestigious title and a big salary. "I'll believe in it when I see results," he said finally. "Right now, I'm choosing to hope it works. That's the best I can offer." "Then I'll take hope. See you in New York, Moshek." Sophie insisted on coming to New York. Ryan initially refused. She'd missed 2 days of school, traveling was expensive. The conference was boring adult stuff. "I want to see you talk in front of all those people," Sophie argued. "It's important. You can watch the video after." "That's not the same. Please, Daddy. I promise I'll be good." Arthur, unhelpfully, sided with her. "Let her come. She's part of this story. She should see where it goes." So Ryan bought an extra plane ticket and spent an evening explaining to Sophie's teacher why educational opportunities sometimes happened outside classrooms. The teacher, a young woman named Ms. Patterson, who'd apparently followed the press coverage, approved the absence without argument. "This is real-world learning," she said. "Bring back pictures." They flew out Friday afternoon. Sophie pressed her face against the airplane window for the entire flight, narrating cloud shapes and tiny cars and rivers that looked like silver ribbons from 30,000 feet. The conference hotel was in Midtown Manhattan, massive, expensive, and filled with people wearing name badges and carrying tote bags emblazoned with corporate logos. Ryan checked in, got their room key, and immediately wanted to turn around and go home. "This is fancy," Sophie whispered, staring at the marble lobby. "Yeah, very fancy." "Are you nervous?" "Terrified." "Good. Miss Patterson says being nervous means you care about doing well." They found their room on the 18th floor. Sophie claimed the bed by the window and immediately started drawing the skyline. Ryan reviewed his presentation for the 100th time, making tiny edits that probably didn't matter but gave him something to do besides panic. Arthur knocked on their door at 7. "Dinner. There's a reception downstairs for speakers and sponsors. You should make an appearance." "I should stay here and practice." "You've practiced enough. Now you need to eat and remember how to talk to humans." Arthur glanced at Sophie. "You coming?" "Can I?" She looked at Ryan. "If you promise to use your quiet indoor voice." "I always use my indoor voice indoors." Sophie. "Fine. Extra quiet indoor voice." The reception was exactly as uncomfortable as Ryan feared. Clusters of people networking aggressively, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, trading business cards like currency. Ryan grabbed a plate of food he didn't want and found a corner to occupy. Victoria spotted him within minutes. She navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than Ryan's entire wardrobe. Sophie, sitting beside Ryan with her own plate of dinner rolls, watched Victoria approach with undisguised suspicion. "You came," Victoria said. "I said I would." "Still, actually showing up is different than planning to." Victoria smiled at Sophie. "Hello again." Sophie didn't smile back. "Hi." "I like your dress," Victoria tried. "It's just a normal dress." The awkwardness was excruciating. Ryan stepped in. "Sophie, this is Victoria Hale. We're working together now." "I know, you made the deal." Sophie took a deliberate bite of her dinner roll. "Are you going to keep it?" Victoria blinked. "The deal?" "Yes, absolutely." Taylor's mom made a deal to pick her up from dance class every Tuesday, but she's only done it twice. Deals don't mean anything if people don't keep them. "You're right, they don't." Victoria knelt down so she was eye level with Sophie. "I promise I'm going to keep this deal, not because I have to, but because I want to. Your dad is building something important, and I want to help make it bigger." Sophie studied her face for a long moment. "Okay, but I'm watching you." "That's fair." After Victoria excused herself to talk to other attendees, Sophie leaned toward Ryan. "She's not as scary as before," Sophie whispered. "No?" "No, she's just regular nervous like you." Ryan watched Victoria move through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, playing the role of confident CEO. But now that Sophie had mentioned it, he could see it too. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when talking to certain people. "Yeah," Ryan said quietly. "I think you're right." Saturday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Ryan's hand shake while tying his shoes. He'd laid out his clothes the night before, dark suit, blue tie, the nice shoes that hurt his feet but looked professional. Sophie helped him with the tie again, her small fingers more competent than his. "You're going to do great," she said. "How do you know?" "Because you always do great when you care about stuff. And you care about this a lot." The presentation was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Ryan spent the morning in the hotel room reviewing slides, practicing transitions, trying to calm his racing heart. Arthur stopped by at noon with coffee and a pep talk. "Remember, they want you to succeed. Nobody's hoping you fail up there." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one standing in front of 300 people. No, but I've sat through enough presentations to know what works. Be clear, be confident, tell them why it matters. You've got this." At 1:30, Ryan made his way to the conference hall. The room was already filling up. Investors, automotive executives, journalists, engineers. More people than he'd expected. Way more. Sophie sat in the front row with Arthur, swinging her legs and clutching a small notebook she'd brought to take notes. Victoria was there too, 3 rows back, sitting with several people Ryan didn't recognize. She caught his eye and nodded once. A conference organizer approached Ryan, clipping a microphone to his lapel and running through technical details. The presentation would be streamed online. There'd be a Q&A after. If he went over time, they'd give him a warning. Any questions? The organizer asked. About 1,000, but Ryan just shook his head. At exactly 2 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The moderator introduced him with a brief bio that made his 3 years in a garage sound almost glamorous. Then Ryan was standing at the podium, staring at 300 faces staring back. His prepared opening line evaporated from his brain. For 5 terrible seconds, Ryan just stood there, frozen. Then he saw Sophie in the front row, giving him a thumbs up. 3 years ago, Ryan began, his voice only shaking slightly. I thought I was done with this industry. I'd lost my wife. I'd been pushed out of a company I'd given everything to, and I was raising a 6-year-old daughter while trying to figure out how to keep functioning. The room was completely silent. I ended up in my late father's garage in Boston, fixing cars because that was something I knew how to do. Something simple. Something that didn't require thinking about the future or the past or anything except the engine in front of me. He clicked to the first slide, a photo of the garage taken before all the recent changes. But the problem with being an engineer is that you can't stop solving problems, even when you want to. And the problem I couldn't ignore was this. We have nearly 300 million cars in America. 90% of them run on fossil fuels. And everyone keeps saying the solution is to buy new electric vehicles that most people can't afford. Next slide. The conversion system. So I built an alternative, a way to convert existing vehicles to electric power in less than a day for under $5,000 per unit. Ryan walked through the technical details, explaining the system architecture, the battery chemistry, the installation process. He showed performance data, cost projections, testimonials from the beta conversions he'd completed. The audience leaned forward, taking notes, asking questions with their eyes. When he reached the manufacturing slide, Ryan paused. I developed this technology alone in a garage because I didn't trust corporations anymore. I'd seen too many good ideas buried by short-term thinking and risk aversion, but I've learned something important over the past month. He clicked to a slide showing the partnership announcement. Scaling innovation requires resources I don't have. Manufacturing capacity, distribution networks, infrastructure investment, which is why I've partnered with Hale Development Corporation. Not because I sold out, but because I realized that changing an entire industry requires more than one person in a garage. Victoria was watching him intently from her seat. Ryan met her eyes for just a moment. That doesn't mean compromising the mission. It means finding partners who understand that sustainable technology isn't just about profit. It's about actually solving problems that matter. Real problems. For real people. He clicked to the final slide. A photo of Sophie standing beside the converted Camry, grinning. My daughter asked me once how a mechanic fights a corporation. The answer is, you don't. You build something better than they can ignore. And then you find people brave enough to help you make it real. The room erupted in applause. Ryan stood at the podium, slightly stunned, while 300 people clapped and several stood. Sophie was on her feet, jumping and waving. Arthur was grinning. Victoria was applauding with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. The Q&A lasted 45 minutes. Questions about battery life, installation complexity, regulatory approval, international scalability. Ryan answered each one honestly, admitting when he didn't know something, explaining the research still needed. One journalist asked the question Ryan had been dreading. Mr. Carter, there were reports that your former employer, Northbrook Technologies, claimed your work infringed their patents. Can you address that? Yes. Northbrook initially raised concerns, but after reviewing the documentation, they withdrew their inquiry. Every piece of this technology was developed independently after my employment ended. I have time-stamped notebooks, patent filings, and legal clearance from multiple attorneys. And the partnership with Hale Development, how did that come about, given that they were initially trying to acquire your property through eminent domain? Ryan smiled slightly. That's a longer story. The short version is that sometimes conflict leads to better understanding. Victoria Hale and I started as adversaries, but we realized we wanted the same thing, sustainable development that actually works. So we figured out how to work together instead of against each other. After the session ended, Ryan was swarmed by people wanting to talk. Engineers with technical questions, investors asking about additional funding rounds, a documentary filmmaker interested in following the company's growth. Ryan handled it all in a daze, shaking hands and collecting business cards and trying to remember names. Sophie rescued him eventually, tugging on his sleeve. "Daddy, I'm hungry, and you promised we could see Times Square." The crowd parted, amused. Ryan excused himself gratefully. They found a pizza place 2 blocks from the hotel, gloriously normal after the intensity of the conference. Sophie ordered a slice bigger than her head and talked non-stop about the presentation. "You were so good. Everyone was listening so hard. And when you showed my picture, I heard people say all behind me. They were probably just being polite." "No, they meant it. Ms. Patterson says you can tell when people really care versus when they're pretending. Those people really cared." Arthur joined them with his own pizza. "Congratulations. You just became the most talked about presenter at a conference full of industry leaders." "That seems unlikely." "Check Twitter. You're trending." Arthur showed his phone. The hashtag #Garage2Glory was filled with clips from Ryan's presentation, comments from attendees, and speculation about the partnership with Hale Development. Ryan felt simultaneously thrilled and terrified. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you go back to Boston and actually build the company you just promised 300 people you could build." Arthur grinned. No pressure. March. Victoria's panel started at 4. Ryan almost didn't attend. He was exhausted from his own presentation and just wanted to hide in the hotel room. But Sophie insisted. "We should watch her talk. She watched you." So they sat in the back of a different conference hall while Victoria and 3 other development executives discussed sustainable urban planning. She was polished, professional, absolutely in her element. But when the moderator asked about the Hartford Street project, Victoria's answer surprised him. "For a long time, I saw development as my job. Transform neighborhoods, increase property values, attract investment. But recently, I was reminded that development without community input is just displacement with better marketing." The moderator leaned forward. "What changed your perspective?" "I met someone who made me question my assumptions. A small business owner who was building something genuinely innovative in a garage I wanted to demolish. Initially, I saw him as an obstacle, but he turned out to be exactly the kind of entrepreneur our city should be supporting, not eliminating." Victoria looked directly at Ryan in the back row. "The partnership we announced this week isn't just about business. It's about recognizing that the best development happens when you work with communities instead of replacing them. Hartford Street will be better because Carter Electric conversion is part of it, not in spite of it." After the panel, Ryan waited while people approached Victoria with questions and business cards. When the crowd finally thinned, he walked up. "That was a good answer," he said. "It was the truth." Victoria glanced at Sophie, who was examining a decorative plant in the corner. "How'd your presentation go?" "According to Twitter, pretty well." "I watched the stream. You were better than pretty well. You were authentic. People respond to that." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. "So," Victoria said finally, "partners?" "Partners," Ryan agreed. This time, the word felt less strange. They flew back to Boston Sunday evening. Sophie fell asleep on the plane, head against Ryan's shoulder, still clutching her notebook full of observations from the conference. Ryan watched the lights of New York disappear below them and thought about everything that had changed in 3 weeks. From a garage under threat to a company with investors and partners and international attention. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something enormous that he couldn't fully see yet. Arthur, sitting across the aisle, caught his eye. "Scared?" Arthur asked quietly. "Terrified." "Good. That means you understand what you're building." Arthur closed his laptop. "Emma would have been proud, you know. Not of the attention or the money. Of you fighting for something that matters. She would have hated the publicity. Probably. But she would have loved that you're teaching Sophie to stand up for herself, to build things, to not give up when the world says no." Ryan looked down at his daughter, sleeping peacefully despite the plane's engine noise and the uncertain future waiting for them. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She would have loved that part." When they landed in Boston, Ryan's phone had 17 new messages. Partnership inquiries, interview requests, technical questions from engineers who'd watched his presentation, and one text from Victoria sent 2 hours earlier. "The Hartford Street Community Board meets Tuesday night. They want to hear about the revised development plans. Both of us should present, show them what partnership actually looks like. Ryan stared at the message for a long time. 2 weeks ago, facing the community board would have meant defending his garage from destruction. Now it meant presenting a collaborative vision for the neighborhood's future. He typed back, "What time?" 7. "I'll pick you up at 6:30. Wear something approachable. They're more likely to trust a mechanic than a CEO. Ryan smiled despite himself and typed, "I am a mechanic." "Not anymore. Now you're both." The phone buzzed one more time. Another message from Victoria. "Thank you for taking a chance on this partnership. I know it wasn't easy." Ryan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he carried sleeping Sophie to the car, drove home through empty Sunday night streets, and tucked her into bed with her elephant. Then he went down to the garage. His garage, still standing, still his, and looked at the whiteboard where this whole thing had started. The equations were long gone, replaced by Sophie's drawings and project timelines and sticky notes with reminders about calls to return and decisions to make. But the space still felt the same, smelled the same, carried the same quiet promise that important things could be built in unlikely places by people who refused to quit. Ryan pulled out his phone and replied to Victoria. "You're welcome. Now let's make sure it was worth it." He turned off the lights and headed upstairs, where Sophie's soft breathing was the only sound in the apartment. Tomorrow, they'd face community boards and investor updates and the million details of building a company from nothing. But tonight, they were home, and the garage was still standing, and that felt like enough. Victoria arrived at 6:20, 10 minutes early, driving a car Ryan didn't recognize, a modest sedan instead of her usual Mercedes. "Borrowed it from a friend," she explained when Ryan raised an eyebrow. "The community board doesn't need to see a CEO pulling up in a luxury vehicle. They need to see someone who actually listens." Sophie watched from the apartment window as Ryan grabbed his jacket. She'd wanted to come to the meeting, but Ryan had convinced her that homework and bedtime were more important than community board politics. "You'll tell me everything tomorrow?" Sophie had asked. "Every boring detail." "It won't be boring. You're going to save the neighborhood." Ryan wished he had her confidence. The drive to the community center took 15 minutes through streets Ryan had known his whole life. Past the bodega where his father used to buy lottery tickets every Friday. Past the park where Emma had taught Sophie to swing. Past buildings that had stood for decades and others that had been torn down and replaced with things nobody asked for. Hartford Street sat in the middle of it all. A 6-block stretch of small businesses, old apartments, and people who'd lived there long enough to remember when the neighborhood had different problems. "Nervous?" Victoria asked. "About facing people whose lives were changing without their permission?" "Yeah, a little. We're not changing anything without permission. That's the whole point of tonight. You already have city council approval. You could bulldoze the whole block tomorrow if you wanted." Victoria pulled into a parking spot outside the community center. "I could, but I won't. Not anymore." She turned off the engine. "I spent 5 years building a reputation as someone who gets things done regardless of obstacles. Tonight, I'm trying to build a different reputation." "As what?" "Someone who actually gives a damn about the people affected by what she builds." Inside the community center smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. Folding chairs were arranged in rows facing a table where 5 board members sat with notebooks and expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. About 40 people filled the chairs: residents, business owners, neighborhood activists. Ryan recognized a few faces. Mrs. Chen from the corner grocery, the couple who ran the Vietnamese restaurant, a guy named Marcus who'd brought his car to the garage twice for brake work. They all looked at Victoria like she was there to personally evict them. The board chair, a woman named Diane Morrison, who'd lived on Hartford Street for 38 years, called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to discuss the proposed development project and recent partnership announcement. Ms. Hale, Mr. Carter, you have 20 minutes to present. Then we'll open for community questions." Diane's expression suggested she'd already decided what she thought. "Please begin." Victoria stood first. Ryan had expected her to launch into corporate presentation mode. Polished, professional, detached. Instead, she left her notes on the table and just talked. 5 weeks ago, I came to this neighborhood with a plan to tear down 6 blocks and rebuild from scratch. I thought I was bringing progress. Better housing, commercial space, green infrastructure, all the things development corporations promise. She paused, looking around the room. What I didn't bring was respect. I didn't ask what this neighborhood needed. I didn't listen to the people who've built their lives here. I just assumed I knew better because I had money and city approval and architectural renderings that looked good in presentations. A few people shifted in their seats. Diane's expression didn't change. I'm not here to apologize for being a business person. I'm here to apologize for being an arrogant one and to propose something different. Victoria pulled out a tablet, projected images onto the wall. Not the original development plans, but something new. Revised layout showing Hartford Street with existing buildings integrated into new construction. The garage preserved and expanded. Mixed-use spaces designed around current businesses instead of replacing them. This is what the partnership with Carter Electric Conversion makes possible. A development that works with the neighborhood instead of erasing it. We keep the character that makes Hartford Street worth living in while adding the infrastructure that makes it sustainable. She clicked to a financial breakdown. I know trust isn't free. So here's what Hale Development is committing to: 60% of new housing units reserved for current residents at controlled rates, priority leasing for existing businesses and commercial spaces, a community fund for infrastructure improvements voted on by neighborhood residents, not corporate executives, and full transparency in every decision. The room was silent. Ryan stood up. His hands were shaking, but his voice held steady. Most of you know me. I fixed your cars, changed your oil, listened to you complain about transmission problems and brake squeals. This garage has been part of Hartford Street for 42 years. My father built it. I inherited it. And when Ms. Hale first showed up threatening to demolish it, I wanted to fight her with everything I had. He looked at Victoria, then back at the room. But I've learned something these past few weeks. Fighting to preserve the past isn't the same as building for the future. My garage matters because of what happens inside it, not because the building is sacred. What matters is that people can work here, create here, make things that improve their lives and their community. Ryan pulled up photos on his phone, projected them beside Victoria's images. The Somerville facility, engineers working on conversion systems, the first production units ready for installation. The technology I developed could have stayed small. Just me, in that garage, doing conversions one at a time. But small doesn't change anything. It doesn't reduce emissions at scale. It doesn't create jobs. It doesn't prove that communities like ours can lead innovation instead of just surviving it. He clicked to the partnership announcement. Working with Hale Development means resources to hire people from this neighborhood, to train them in cutting-edge technology, to turn Hartford Street into a place where sustainable transportation isn't just talked about, it's built. Ryan met Diane's eyes. But only if you want that. This doesn't work if we force it on people who don't want to be here anymore. Diane leaned back in her chair. Questions from the community. Hands shot up immediately. Mrs. Chen went first. My lease expires in 3 months. What happens to my store? Victoria answered. We honor your current lease terms and offer a new space in the development at the same rent, adjusted only for inflation. You choose the location from available commercial units. And if I don't like any of them? Then we negotiate something you do like, or we help you relocate with compensation for business interruption. Marcus raised his hand. What about jobs? You're talking about training people in this new technology. Who decides who gets trained? Ryan fielded that one. We're starting with a pilot program. 15 positions. Priority goes to Hartford Street residents, then expanding based on demand. No prior engineering experience required. We'll train from the ground up. And what's it pay? Starting at $22 an hour with benefits, $25 after certification. The number caused murmurs. That was higher than most entry-level positions in the area. A younger woman in the back stood. I'm sorry, but this sounds too good to be true. Rich developer shows up, promises everything, then delivers nothing once the cameras leave. We've seen this before. Victoria didn't flinch. You're right to be skeptical. Words are cheap. Which is why we're proposing a community oversight committee with veto power over major decisions. 5 residents, elected by neighborhood vote, with full access to project financials and development plans. If we're not keeping our promises, you can stop us. Legally binding? Legally binding, written into the development agreement. Diane spoke up. And the garage specifically? Mr. Carter, you're saying it stays. But in what form? Ryan glanced at Victoria, who nodded for him to answer. The original building stays as my personal workshop and the company's origin point. We're adding a facility expansion behind it, manufacturing space, training center, demonstration area. The garage itself gets renovated, but it remains recognizable. My daughter drew height marks on the wall in there every birthday for 3 years. Those stay. His voice caught slightly on that last part. Sophie's marks, Emma's mural, his father's old tool bench, they weren't just objects. They were proof that ordinary people in ordinary places could build extraordinary things if given the chance. The questions continued for 90 minutes. Some hostile, some cautiously optimistic, all deserving of real answers. Ryan and Victoria took turns responding, occasionally contradicting each other and then working through the disagreement in real time. It wasn't smooth, it wasn't perfectly choreographed, but it was honest. Finally, Diane called for a break. The board members huddled in the corner while residents clustered in small groups, debating what they'd heard. Victoria and Ryan stood near the coffee station, exhausted. "That went better than I expected," Victoria said quietly. "They didn't throw anything at us. That's probably a win. I'm serious. You were good up there. Authentic. I just told the truth. Most people can't do that when they're scared. You did." Victoria poured herself coffee that looked like it had been brewed during the previous administration. "Whatever happens, thank you for backing the Oversight Committee proposal. I know giving residents veto power makes you nervous too. It makes me terrified. But they should have power over decisions that affect their lives. That's not radical. It's basic respect." Diane called them back to the table. "The board has discussed your proposal. We have concerns about timeline, about enforcement mechanisms, about whether promises made tonight will hold up in 6 months or a year." Diane looked at her fellow board members, then back at Ryan and Victoria. "But we also recognize that this is the first time in 5 years a developer has actually listened to us instead of talking at us." Ryan held his breath. "So here's what we're proposing. A 6-month pilot period. You begin the renovation work on Mr. Carter's garage and the immediate surrounding properties. You hire the first cohort of trainees from this neighborhood. You establish the Oversight Committee with real authority. And if, and only if, those commitments are met with measurable results, we'll support the broader development project." Victoria nodded immediately. "Agreed." "Mr. Carter?" "Agreed," Ryan said. "Then we have a conditional partnership. Don't make us regret it." Outside, after the meeting ended and people filtered back into the night, Victoria and Ryan stood on the sidewalk in silence for a moment. 6 months, Victoria said finally. "That's not much time. It's enough if we actually do what we promised. You realize we just committed to completely restructuring a $60 million development project based on community input we haven't fully collected yet." Ryan smiled. "Yeah, terrifying, isn't it?" Victoria laughed. Genuinely laughed. For the first time since Ryan had met her. "I'm either about to build the most important project of my career or tank my company's reputation spectacularly. Probably both. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be true." Ryan started walking toward his truck. "See you tomorrow. We've got work to do." Whoa. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a chaos of hiring, renovation planning, and contract negotiations. The garage closed for construction. The first time in 42 years the doors had been locked for more than a day. Sophie handled it with surprising maturity. "It's weird not having it open," she admitted one evening, staring at the plywood covering the entrance. "But it's going to be better after, right?" "That's the plan." "And we're really staying?" "We're really staying." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. Ryan split his time between the Somerville facility, where the first production units were being assembled, and endless meetings about the Hartford Street renovation. Architects, contractors, community committee members, everyone had opinions, and Ryan learned quickly that his job wasn't just building technology anymore. His job was listening, compromising, finding solutions that made nobody completely happy, but everyone could live with. It was exhausting and frustrating, and nothing like engineering. But it mattered. The first training cohort started on a cold Monday in early December. 15 people from Hartford Street and the surrounding neighborhoods, ranging in age from 19 to 57. Some had technical backgrounds. Some had never held a wrench. Ryan spent the first day walking them through basic electrical principles, watching their faces shift from confusion to understanding as concepts clicked into place. One trainee, a woman named Lisa, who'd been laid off from a retail job 3 months earlier, stayed after class. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why are you doing this? The training program, I mean. You could hire experienced engineers and move faster." Ryan thought about his father, who'd started as a mechanic's assistant at 17 and spent 40 years building something he could be proud of. About Emma, who'd believed people deserved chances even when their resumes didn't shine. About Sophie, who'd asked how a mechanic fights a corporation. "Because experienced engineers already have opportunities," Ryan said finally. "I'm interested in creating opportunities for people who don't. The ones who get overlooked because they don't have the right credentials or connections or zip codes." Lisa nodded slowly. "My daughter's 8. She keeps asking me what I do now that I'm not working at the store. Yesterday I told her I'm learning to build electric cars. She didn't believe me. Bring her by sometime. Let her see." "Really? Really? The future she's growing up in needs people who can build things, not just buy things. Might as well show her what that looks like." Victoria stopped by the Somerville facility the following week to check on production progress. She found Ryan in the assembly area, covered in grease, helping troubleshoot a wiring issue on one of the conversion units. "You know you have employees for this now, right?" she said. Ryan wiped his hands on a rag. "I know, but I like understanding the problems they're facing. Hard to lead people through challenges I've never experienced." "That's annoyingly principled. I'll take that as a compliment." Victoria pulled out her tablet. "I have updates on the Hartford Street renovation. Construction's ahead of schedule. The community committee approved the final designs for the training center, and we have 12 businesses committed to moving into the new commercial spaces." "That's good news." "It is, but we have a problem." Victoria showed him a financial projection. "The controlled rent commitments are creating a gap in expected revenue. We're about $2 million short over the next 3 years. Ryan's stomach dropped. "Can you cover it?" "I can, but my board is pushing back. They want market rate rents on at least 40% of units. That defeats the entire purpose. We promised affordability." "I know, which is why I told them no." Victoria closed the tablet. "I'm putting personal capital into the project to cover the gap. Not as Hale Development, as me. It's the only way to make the numbers work without breaking promises." Ryan stared at her. "That's a lot of money." "It's also the right thing to do. You taught me that." "I didn't teach you anything." "Yes, you did. You taught me that some things matter more than profit margins, that keeping your word to people who have no power to enforce it is what separates real leadership from corporate bullshit." Victoria met his eyes. "I'm not doing this to be noble. I'm doing it because I want to prove I can build something worth being proud of." "Same as you." Ryan didn't know what to say. 6 weeks ago, this woman had been trying to destroy everything he'd built. Now she was risking her own money to protect a community she'd never met. People were complicated. More complicated than enemies and allies, good and bad. Simple categories that made sense from a distance but fell apart up close. "Thank you," Ryan said finally. "Don't thank me yet. Wait until we see if it actually works." The garage reopened 3 days before Christmas. The exterior looked almost the same. Same dented steel door, same faded sign, same fundamental character. But inside, everything had transformed. The front half remained Ryan's personal workshop, tools organized on walls, lifts waiting for vehicles. Sophie's height marks carefully preserved and protected behind glass. Emma's mural had been professionally restored, the colors brighter than they'd been in years. The back half now opened into a larger space, the new training center and demonstration area. Modern equipment, proper ventilation, workstations designed for both teaching and production. Sophie ran through the whole building twice, examining every detail. "It's perfect," she declared. "Exactly the same, but completely different." Ryan couldn't have described it better himself. The grand reopening was a small affair. Community members, trainees, investors, and a few journalists who'd followed the story from the beginning. Arthur gave a speech about innovation and community that made half the room tear up. Victoria talked about the power of partnership and accidentally called Ryan the most stubborn person I've ever met, before correcting it to the most principled. Ryan kept his own remarks short. This garage represents something important. Not because the building is special, but because of what it proves. That ordinary people in ordinary places can create extraordinary things if they're given a chance and refuse to give up when things get hard. He looked at Sophie, standing in the front row wearing a hard hat someone had given her.
My daughter asked me once how you fight powerful people who want to take what you've built. The answer isn't fighting, it's building something so valuable, so important, so connected to community that destroying it becomes impossible. You win by making yourself matter.
After the ceremony, people filtered through the space, examining the conversion systems on display, asking questions, taking photos. Ryan found himself standing in his old workshop, exactly where he'd been standing 2 months ago when Victoria first walked in. She appeared beside him now, looking around the space. Strange, isn't it? Victoria said. How much can change in such a short time? Yeah, strange. Do you regret any of it? The partnership, the publicity, giving up your privacy? Ryan thought about the question seriously. He'd lost things, quiet, anonymity, the simple life he'd tried to build after Emma died. But he'd gained things too, purpose, community, the knowledge that his work mattered beyond just keeping cars running. No, he said finally, I don't regret it, but I'm glad it's over. Over? Victoria raised an eyebrow. Ryan, this is just the beginning. We have 3 more buildings to renovate, 200 trainees to hire over the next year, and a technology platform to scale across multiple markets. We're nowhere near over. I know, I meant the fighting part, the uncertainty about whether this would work. That's over. Is it? Ryan looked around the garage. At Sophie, explaining the conversion system to a journalist with the confidence of someone 3 times her age. At Arthur, chatting with investors about next year's growth projections. At the trainees from the first cohort, wearing company shirts and showing their families the workstations where they'd learned to build something new. Yeah, Ryan said. It is, Matt. Christmas morning arrived quiet and cold. Ryan woke to find Sophie already awake, sitting at the kitchen table drawing. Merry Christmas, kiddo. Merry Christmas. She didn't look up from her sketch. I'm making you something. Yeah? What is it? You'll see when I'm done. No peeking. They made breakfast together, pancakes, because Sophie insisted on tradition. While they ate, Ryan's phone buzzed with messages. Arthur sending holiday wishes. Cynthia and the other investors forwarding their quarterly report with notes of congratulations. Marcus sharing an article about the Hartford Street project that had been picked up by a national publication. And one from Victoria. Merry Christmas. My mother wants to meet you. Apparently you're all I talk about these days. Fair warning, she's worse than I am. Ryan smiled and typed back, Merry Christmas. Tell her I look forward to the terror. After breakfast, Sophie presented her drawing. It showed the garage, old version and new version side by side. In front of the old version stood Ryan, Sophie, and a carefully drawn figure that looked like Emma. In front of the new version stood Ryan, Sophie, Victoria, Arthur, and a crowd of other people. It's everyone who helped, Sophie explained. The old garage was just us. The new garage is all of us together. Ryan pulled her into a hug, blinking back the tears that threatened. It's perfect. I know. I'm really good at drawing now. They spent the rest of the day doing absolutely nothing productive. Watched movies. Built a blanket fort. Made hot chocolate that was 90% marshmallows. Normal things. Small things. The kind of day Emma would have loved. That evening, after Sophie went to bed, Ryan stood in the garage one more time. The lights were off, the equipment silent, the space holding the quiet promise of tomorrow's work. He thought about his father, who'd built this place with hope and determination and the belief that honest work mattered. About Emma, who'd pushed him to be better even when he didn't want to be. About Sophie, who'd never stopped believing her dad could do impossible things. And about himself. The person he'd been 3 months ago, isolated, hiding, convinced the world had nothing left to offer him. And the person he'd become, still imperfect, still scared sometimes, but building something that mattered with people who gave a damn. The journey from one version to the other hadn't been smooth. It had been messy and painful and full of moments where quitting seemed easier than continuing. But those were the moments that counted, the ones where you chose to keep going anyway. Ryan's phone buzzed one last time, text from Victoria. The board approved the expanded development plans. Full community oversight, affordable housing commitments, everything we promised, unanimous vote, we did it. He read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. They'd done it. Actually done it. Saved the garage. Built the company. Proved that partnerships between unlikely allies could create something better than either could build alone. Ryan typed back, "We did. Now the real work begins." Always does. That's what makes it worth doing. He put away his phone and turned off the garage lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new reasons to question whether he was doing any of this right. But tonight, standing in the darkness of his father's garage with his daughter sleeping safely upstairs and a future full of possibility waiting ahead, Ryan Carter understood something he'd forgotten in the years since Emma died. Success wasn't about achieving perfection or avoiding failure or proving yourself to people who doubted you. Success was about building something that mattered with people you trusted, in a place you loved, for reasons that went deeper than money or recognition or revenge. It was about showing up every day and doing the work, even when the work was hard, especially when the work was hard. And it was about teaching the next generation, whether that was Sophie or Lisa's 8-year-old daughter or the kid who'd grow up in the renovated Hartford Street neighborhood, that ordinary people could create extraordinary change if they cared enough to try. The garage was staying, the company was growing, the community was stronger, and everything Ryan truly needed had been waiting inside that small garage all along. Not just the tools or the technology, but the courage to rebuild after loss, the wisdom to accept help from unexpected allies, and the faith that tomorrow could be better than yesterday if you were willing to fight for it. He climbed the stairs to the apartment, checked on Sophie one last time, and finally allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. More than okay. They were going to be exactly where they needed to be. If you enjoyed this story, please give the video a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every comment and truly appreciate hearing your opinions. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who enjoys this kind of content and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next fascinating story. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.